go to the soil and makes this polluted. Still, there is the huge dark cloud from these three corners in the city, and this is not a military, as you know, this is not a military target to get at.
Oh, well, so what recommendations are you making to citizens as a result of this pollution?
The main recommendation was that everybody who cannot, who is, it is possible for them to stay at home, closing the, all of the windows, and if they have to go out of the home, they use masks. And those who are at risk do not do that, and until the pollution is clear from the sky.
Deputy Minister, how well prepared is Iran?
This print prints everything to get your brand shirts, water bottles, and totes, so everyone can gift it, work in it, and
Nice.
I think our, the health system
wasn't a problem. It's not like when you go to a Taylor Swift concert. Boy, if it weren't for Ticketmaster, I would have to pay it. I mean, it's just not like that. She can command what she wants to command, and a lot of these artists can command what they want to command. And the idea that no, it's Ticketmaster that makes you pay, I always thought was
fanciful?
Yes, fanciful. That's the word.
Yeah, now I know your favorite words.
Yeah, fanciful, ill-advised, and suboptimal. Because I learned along. Oh, raise his eyebrows. Because when I decided to switch to being a statesman, I realized the way you can stay out of hot water is use this definitive term.
You should write a book. Kramer's the source.
Oh my God! I learned one of them, ill-advised, from a guy who is the Spanish. He's the Spanish announcer for the Miami Heat, which is owned, of course, by his boss. And he said, listen, when you have a shot and it's taken really badly, you say, oh, that was ill-advised, instead of saying that was a horrible shot. So it was ill-advised I think it might have been ill-advised for Novo to make that deal with
him.
Yeah.
Yes. What is important to watch this week?
If we go back to that price of oil that we had over the weekend, the one that Brian described as a short squeeze,
right.
That's when you say, you'll come in, you and I'll come in and say, well, what's up? And I'll say, not even sure.
Right. Yeah. Positioning on WTI was, I think, net short, which was interesting.
That was a mistake.
Yeah.
Well, no one thought the desalinization, and no one thought Israel going after the oil facilities, which is like, that's off limits.
Long week ahead, Jim.
Look
forward to tonight. Mad Money, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, as we try to stabilize here at some levels around 66.50. Don't go anywhere.
When I visited Fernandez at IMAX's headquarters outside Toronto, we went to the facility where IMAX designs and maintains its cameras.
A global glut. Lower prices and falling demand from chocolate makers are also responsible there. Catherine Sawyer reports.
In Ivory Coast, Marie Bru says she's had a good harvest of cocoa, mostly used to make chocolate. She's expecting to sell it through her cooperative at a price set at the beginning of the planting season in October. But while cocoa prices have lost nearly 3/4 of their value in the last year, and Bru and other farmers worry this could cut into their
The one thing is we are going to invest to build it right and to build it for longevity. But do you need 10 of them? Building 4, that was the right number. And do we potentially want to build a couple more? Maybe a couple more. But I don't think we need 10 because they won't always be in use all the time.
I imagine that at different points you need to tell people no. What's that process like for you?
Oh yeah, it's a key role in the CFO position. It is a word that most people are used to, and yet they still think you're not going to say it.
Astonishing day for US technology.
Shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming. This is March 9th. I will also release this on other channels later in the day. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please help support the work that I do by making sure you share the links, ask your social media to follow me. You can follow me on X, GETTR, TikTok, Substack, Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Many ways to watch the work that I do. And you can also donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. I have lots of products on my store. Please help support the work that I do to help build the channel, but also to help to improve your health and wellness. The big news, oil was trading in the Asian market above $100. Brent hit approximately 119. WTI was trading, I believe, as high as 117. And then as the session started in Europe, it started to go down. Right now, oil is trading at $99.74 for WTI. Natural gas is trading at 3.2. It was trading also at around the 3.4 last night. So energy markets are really volatile right now. All right, there's large swings that are taking place. So with that, the equity market is trading at 6,652. I still have a target for year end at 7,400 to 7,800. So buy into the equity market for the S&P 500. VIX is trading at 30. I did a market analysis, and published it yesterday. It's possible that VIX will hit 45, so pay attention. Euro and USD is trading at 1.15. Bitcoin's trading at 69,000. Japanese yen's trading at 158. And the 10-year bond is trading at it was trading at like 4.1. What is that right now? 4.16. All right, with that said, let's listen into CNBC.
Well, it's no wonder we see sharp swings in markets like the Kospi, which, yes, was one of the darlings of the market and built up. It's an AI-driven market, not an energy-driven market. So South Korea's economy, certainly vulnerable. Places like India, they do price controls so that they don't have out-of-control inflation, but it's certainly a weight on their fiscal position when they have to pay up these higher prices for oil right now.
Yeah, and the market has been pretty careful in trying to hand out the punishment according to who is most hit, and also according to the markets that were up the most. It's really interesting how the overnight hours have absorbed a lot of the shock, both on oil and equity prices. So the S&P 500 at the lows yesterday, overnight, were down more than 2%. Off of Friday's close.
Japan was down 5.5%.
Yeah.
South Korea was down.
And WTI was up at 115 at the high. So it shows you that you've had this moderating effect when the U.S. hours open. The rest of the world equity markets are down like 8.5% month to date. S&P down like 3.5%. S&P did this morning though get to a -5% off the highs pullback. Doesn't really mean a lot in the abstract, but it shows you that the downside has been kind of grudging. I think that every price is a position on the spectrum of probabilities, and the stock market in the U.S. has wanted to remain open to the idea that we get de-escalation, we get relief, we get a short duration crisis, and we can move on from there. Whether we get that or not, unclear, but the market doesn't want to price out the possibility.
I mean, for those other countries, the fear is now they're going to have to import oil. They need it at a much higher price. For the American economy, it's more about the U.S. consumer, and gas prices are rising. We know that. If you look at the price of gas across the country, it has risen about 20% since the war began. It's very different in places like California than, say, Kansas, which is the lowest gas price in the country, but we're still watching those prices go up. There it is, the national gas price average, and look, it's $3.48 a gallon right now, according to AAA, 17% increase from when the war began. The concern is around consumer companies, and so some of the research firms are starting to dig into who's most exposed. Wolf Research looked at coverage of some of the big retailers of who has the lowest income customer on average. I don't know exactly how they got this. They claim from the census and from their own research, but Dollar General, for instance, which reports earnings, $60, low income, $60,000 consumer there. So that's where it's going to be most vulnerable because they'll be affected by the high prices at the pump. They have put Walmart in there, Advanced Auto Parts, Dollar Tree. We'll wait to hear, because we're going to get retailers what the commentary is in some of these reports about sort of real-time behavior changes, if any, from the consumer at some of these retailers because of the higher prices at the pump.
Yeah, we'll get Petco this week, Ulta, Dollar General, I think Dick's as well.
Yes.
And then Lennar Friday too, the housing data.
I mean, the retailers and travel names have definitely borne the brunt. I think if there's a little bit of a silver lining, it's the levels we're starting from. So gasoline was cheap.
Yep.
Gasoline was cheap relative to its recent history. Gasoline was cheap relative to incomes. If you look at the cost of a gallon of gas relative to average hourly earnings for non-supervisory and production workers, it was near a 30-year low before this spike. In other words, you could buy 11 gallons of gas for the average hourly wage going into this. Now,
so maybe it won't have as big.
What it does is push against the idea.
2024. We've been here before recently, and we didn't have.
In absolute terms,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
But incomes have gone up, and so I do think that you're definitely pushing against the run-it-hot economy in the first part of the year, the tax refund bonanza. All that's getting washed out with these headwinds that are coming in, and I don't think that necessarily it means it completely knocks the economy off stride.
Well, Kalshi, I've been looking at the recession ads.
Yep.
This is the prediction markets. We have a partnership with them, and they were 22% on February 28th. Now they've gone up into the 30% or so range. They've jumped, but it's not above 50%. At least if you believe the people that are betting on this sort of thing.
Yeah, I find this sort of funny because obviously there's market-based ways of saying that we've been betting forever. I mean, stock and bond markets are, nature's original prediction markets. And there's ways to infer what the implied probability of recession is. And that's kind of a nobody knows and probably not likely is really the.
It's fun to throw this one
of course,
next as well.
False precision, that's what we want.
But it's not like the bond market is pricing in greater chance of recession because we've seen yields go up.
It totally agrees. It totally agrees with what the other markets are saying is my point.
Coincident indicator, maybe.
Yeah. Well, now in the broader market, as stocks do get hit hard to start the week, let's bring in Lori Calvasina, RBC Capital Markets Head of U.S. Equity Strategy. Lori, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So I assume and know you've been stress testing your kind of fundamental view and general market take for $100 oil, how long it lasts. What do you get when you do that?
So we have 5 different models that go into our year-end forecast, sort of process or 12-month forward process. And we took one of those models, our valuation earnings test. This is the easiest one to kind of run through this scenario on. So for the earnings assumptions, I went back to 2022 and 2015-16. 15-16 was flat earnings. 2022 was 5% earnings growth. So we took those 2 numbers for earnings. Then we went to our PE assumption and we baked in 3.6% headline inflation, which our economists have done their own stress tests on $100 oil, and that was one of their outputs for 4Q. So we threw that in. I added in 4.5% on 10-year Treasury yields, honestly, just to put some stress in the model, and I left the Fed flat because I didn't feel like that was really in the zeitgeist at the moment. And what I came up with was basically 6,600 to 6,900 is fair value, which is kind of this range we've been stuck in. So the idea that we may be baking in some stagflationary impact, you can make a reasonable argument that it's there. Now, if you want to take the bear side on my model, that was my strongest model. It had been forecasting over 8,000 over the next 12 months. So you lock 1,000 points off of that. That doesn't feel so good, but it does give you some comfort when you can run through the numbers, at least that we have a decent starting point.
And then in terms of, I guess, more the tactical picture, it's kind of interesting. A lot of commentary this morning saying, well, look, the market doesn't quite look very washed out. You can look at, people are paying up for downside protection, there's no doubt, but maybe not at extremes. You have seen, sort of the market get oversold at an index level, but not the average stock, because the market's been trying to escape through rotation. So where does that bring you in terms of whether we've done enough? Because, the PE, forward PE has come down 2 points since October.
Yeah, when we just look at the bottom up forward PE, we're down to 23 times, and I forget how high we were. I think it was maybe close to 30. It was 25 a few weeks ago. What we saw in 2022 was that version of PE went down to the long-term average, and that helped mark the low and the bottom of the market. That average right now is about 18.5 times, so there's still some wood to chop there. I like the Russell 2000 better as a broader barometer for these kinds of stress periods. If you look at 2022, 2023, and then 2025, the big drawdowns we had those years, small caps started baking in a recession. In 2025, around the tariffs, we got to 12.65 times and 11.13 times as recession pricing. Small caps are down to 16.1, the average is 15.2, so again, a little bit more wood to chop. You look at how quickly small caps are getting hit, that's probably going to be the better barometer to help us gauge a bottom here.
What is the history of oil spikes and shocks like this on corporate earnings? How long does it last? How big of an impact?
It's a great question. I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but we did go back and look at the post-COVID environment, and we found a minus 40% inverse correlation between stocks and the oil price, and that was much more powerful than what I would have thought. I mean, it's not 100%.
All right. Natural gas is trading at 3.275. Not a lot of movement right now at this movement. But what is volatile is oil. And oil now is trading at 103.84. If you're playing a leveraged ETF, take a look at UCO. UCO is longing 3 times leverage. Also, Gush is a long ETF for exploration in energy companies. All right. A lot of times Gush will go down if the equity market broad index goes down. But when there's some unique features that are taking place in the news that are related to energy, you may actually see Gush go up. And Gush right now is trading at 36.57. DRIP is trading at 5.14. DRIP is the inverse of Gush. All right, but there's a lot of movement going on in oil. It's very volatile right now.
On all 3 of those questions, healthcare, financials, utilities, and communication services. So there are some decent pockets of resiliency, even if we start to bake in worst case scenarios.
Although financials are the worst sector of the year by a pretty wide margin.
Right.
Do you think the inflation, the tightening conditions, does it leave us vulnerable to a credit event?
Well, if you look at financials, I mean, and this is sort of the pickle on this one, they tend to need an inflecting economy, so they need ISM manufacturing to move up. They need consumer confidence to move up. They tend to outperform. We've got the private credit issues weighing on that sector, and, one of the things we've started to write, I wrote it again in the weekly this week, is we just need, maybe some time to get through this, and not have things, come to a worst case scenario. But there's just not a lot of transparency in this industry.
All right. The S&P 500 is continuing to go down. It's at 6,638. VIX popped up to 31.73. Again, if you pay attention to the update that I published yesterday, it was Sunday afternoon when I published it, I was predicting that VIX is going to go to 45. All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. Get the great products that I offer. These are products that I use to help with my health and wellness. They're very high quality. You use these every day, and you're going to improve your health. One such product is the structural nanosilver soaps that I have. You can get it in peppermint and also in lemongrass. Very high quality. It has structural nanosilver. It's going to neutralize when you place it on your skin, and it'll help to clean the pores. It's very high quality soap. So please go to my store and get a few bars. I also have magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc is super important to boost up your immune system, help with brain function. A lot of people don't realize that magnesium is super important for brain function. When you get older, your brain isn't going to work as well. Taking magnesium is going to help you. Also, magnesium increases the efficacy of vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 will work better if you take magnesium. So make sure you get magnesium and zinc from my store. Take it every day. Boost up that immune system, help with your brain function. And vitamin C and magnesium helps with your skin, brain function, and your immune system. You can take it with the magnesium and zinc together, or you can take it separately. It's up to you. But I recommend you taking it together. Please go to my store, studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5, all cap. But right now, oil is fluctuating a lot. So right now it's at $102.51 a barrel. Now let's listen into Qatar. I think Qatar is saying something about the bombings.
We'll continue trying to seek de-escalation. At the end of the day, they're our neighbors, and it's our destiny. So really strong words to say we're being betrayed, but also that they are willing to talk. And this has been reflected from a number of meetings taking place, diplomacy on the sidelines of this war. The Arab League met on Sunday. The Gulf Cooperation Council met with the European Union last week on Thursday as well. And all of them are saying, yeah, all of these countries have a right to defend themselves, but it seems like these channels of communication are open, that they want to talk, that they want to stop these volleys of attack. It is causing pain, as I said before, to the energy market, but also civilian infrastructure and military infrastructure as well.
What this reminds me of, and I've been trading for a while, long time, right? It reminds me of the volatility in the currency market during Lehman, in the aftershock of Lehman, that first year. The pip candles on each of the currency trades. I used to trade lots of currency. I used to trade 17 different pairs of currency with different hedging strategies. But the size of the candles when I was on the trading floor was very large. And a lot of people, when they were using stop losses, they would get triggered and they would close the position, especially when the Federal Reserve started talking. You're seeing something very similar with oil here. So you have the different OPEC representatives talking. You have the Gulf state representatives talking. You have the European Union deciding if they're going to use the reserves or not. You have Trump and CENTCOM talking. All these things create volatility in the market. So you're going to see wild swings. This is not going to be just up, 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 up for oil. There's going to be, it may go up, like last night, it went up to 115 or so or more, and then it came down and went below 100 and then popped back up. And now it's trading at 102. It may trade at 98 later today. It may be trading at 110. We don't know. But there's going to be a lot of volatility in the energy markets.
In Europe. So politicians in both Brussels are keen to find a way to de-escalate the situation in the Gulf and in the Middle East.
Nick, stick around. We've got a lot to unpack. These are live images. This is a fresh new wave of airstrikes taking place on the Lebanese capital, Beirut. You can see these plumes of smoke that are rising through these central suburbs. The Israeli army saying is targeting buildings which house Hezbollah institutions. Bernard Smith is in Beirut. Now, Bernard, you're at that shelter for displaced people. What's the situation there?
Yeah, and we're not that far from where those airstrikes are going in, Richard. This is a stadium which is being converted on the edge of the southern suburbs, which is being converted into a shelter for internally displaced Lebanese from the southern suburbs of Beirut or from further south. This particular area we're in is for those with physical and mental.
I want to go back to CNBC talking about the oil prices.
Of capital spending reallocated to more oil drilling in the U.S.
So how should you be positioned on the American oil companies?
Well, Sarah. I mean, I think owning Exxon and Chevron, the largest oil producers in the world. For us, we think that natural gas actually has got the bigger opportunity. what not a lot of people are paying attention to is the fact that international natural gas prices are up a lot, well more than oil. And what really shows the importance of natural gas going forward into the future in the U.S., natural gas prices aren't up anywhere close to what the international prices are. And so I think that's an opportunity to be investing in some of the natural gas-related companies. Infrastructure stocks are a great place to be as well.
All right, breaking news.
A lot of discussion about China and
All right,
some of the
breaking
purchases
news.
of oil that they made.
France says the G7 is not there yet on releasing oil stockpiles as the Middle East conflict rattles energy markets. So if the Strait of Hormuz is still clogged up, there's not going to be additional oil being released by the EU. By the not the EU, by the G7. So they're going to wait. And most likely oil is going to, I would think oil is going to go up because of that news, but who knows? Right now, oil's at $100 a barrel, $191 a barrel.
That the straits really don't move for a while. Does the conversation change around solar? Do we like revert back to incrementally toward an EV world? Did things like that happen so quickly?
Well, we tried that a few years ago, Carl, and really wasn't that successful. So I think oil and gas are here to stay. They've represented over 80% of the global energy supply for decades. Towards we don't see that change. We continue to see oil and natural gas in particular, representing a large portion of the global energy supply for the decades to come, especially with AI, because AI is going to be an important driver of the future economy, and natural gas is going to be an important future driver of the economy in an AI-driven economy.
Rob, appreciate it as always. Rob Thummel over at Tortoise. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Much more on energy ahead when Goldman Sachs' co-head of global commodity joins us next hour. Plus, the broader market reaction to the.
All right, let's listen into Al Jazeera talking about oil price surge.
First of March today, Brent and WTI crude are trading at $118 and $117 a barrel, respectively. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying that the longer the conflict goes on, the greater the impact it'll have on British people and business. He says his government is working with international partners to ease the economic fallout.
A lot of people are going to begin to think, well, that's happening out in Iran and in the Gulf states, but I can sense it's going to affect me back here in the United Kingdom, particularly the economy. The longer this goes on, the more likely the potential for an impact on our economy, an impact into the lives and households of everybody and every business. And our job is to get ahead of that, to look around the corner, assess the risk, monitor the risks, and work with others in relation to that.
Nicholas Huck is in Brussels, but let's first of all get over to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett. Well, Kimberly, I mean, American consumers are very sensitive about the amount a gallon of gas costs at the pump. So is that concern elevated right now? And what is Donald Trump?
Well, the U.S. president has posted trying to alleviate the fears of the American public on a social media platform. What he's been saying is that insisting that this is simply a short-term price spike, but with oil now above $100 a barrel, 119 to be exact, the American public skeptical that this is the short-term pain that the U.S. president is promising. The Energy Secretary has said that the prices will fall within weeks, not months. But again, polling data suggests that Americans are not buying these arguments. Now, the argument that the U.S. president has made is that once the nuclear threat is over, that this is when the production will stabilize, the prices, in his words, will drop rapidly. But right now, just in the last week, they have spiked rapidly, some 30 cents a gallon, and that is translating to enormous prices in states like Washington State, California, and Hawaii. So the administration is working to mitigate the price of oil. What we know is that given that choke point in the Strait of Hormuz that has responsible for about 20% of energy production, that what is happening is that the United States is promising political risk insurance. In other words, that cargo vessels and oil tankers would have protection as they transit through that area. But again, this has not translated to a reduction in prices thus far, and the administration working hard to alleviate the concerns of a very nervous public in the United States. But this is particularly volatile for the U.S. president right now, given the fact that he was elected to lower energy prices and the opposite is occurring.
Can we thank Nicholas Huck is in Brussels, and we go back to you, Nick. G7 ministers are set to meet Emmanuel Macron at the moment, press, saying that maybe they should be looking at options considering the various countries' strategic reserves. And don't forget also the US has strategic reserves, which are massive. So what are we hearing about all that, Nick?
That's right. I mean, we heard from the finance minister from Japan, Katayama, suggesting that these strategic oil reserves may be released by the International Energy Agency. Interestingly, earlier today, the EU spokesperson said that there is no direct threat to oil supply here, but we've seen the prices at the pump here, and they've already shot up, especially the price of diesel that's gone up to almost $2.3 a liter. Now that's extremely expensive, and we've spoken to some people here who are worried about these prices going up. As I mentioned early on, there are elections taking place, local elections, and this clearly shows how this war is affecting the pocket money of people and how they can pay for their oil and gas. So the idea here is that if they release these oil reserves, and that would eventually lead to those prices decreasing or at least stabilizing. The fear is that the price of oil or gas, petrol at the pump will continue to increase as this conflict goes on. And this is having direct impact on people here in Brussels, throughout Europe, but also in the G7 countries.
Nick, thank you so much, Nicholas Huck, there joining us from Brussels, and thanks to Kimberly Halkett there at the White House. Now, Paul Hicken is the chief economist and editor-in-chief at Petroleum Economist and Oil and Gas Analysis Provider, and he joins us now from London. Thank you for joining us, Paul. So we're looking at the possibility of the release of strategic reserves, but is that a bit premature right now? And what would be the tipping point for countries to do so?
115.
Hi, thanks for having me back on. Well, basically, the tipping point is the risk of shortages, and we've seen the prices spike. But at the moment, there is some oil on water, there is still oil in the system, and the fact is that there is the option of tapping those SPRs whenever they feel that need is going to be there. But the risk of tapping the SPRs, while it provides 90 days of cover to demand from the OECD countries. At the same time, once you start using that, you are starting to deplete those resources, and that also plays a risk on the markets.
Now, Paul, the other aspect here, of course, is, how badly affected is the infrastructure from the bombings that we've had, and also perhaps protective shutting down of some of these facilities, because it's easy to turn them off, it's not so easy to turn them back on again. And what do these outages mean for supply in the longer term?
Yeah, that's a great question. And well, I think at the moment it's really about getting that Strait of Hormuz back up and running, and that's not going to happen in any shape or form until there's a resolution to the conflict. So while we're in this situation, it's that ultimately there's not been too much damage to a lot of the infrastructure. Yes, we've seen with Qatar, with the LNG facilities, and Saudi Arabia's refining facilities. But at the same time, generally what we're seeing with the shut-ins with Kuwait and Iraq and those producers is that they're so dependent on that strait that they don't have any other options. Saudi Arabia has the East-West pipeline, and UAE also has a pipeline to navigate around 7-8 million barrels a day out from another option from Strait of Hormuz. But the Kuwait and Iraq and those producers, they are really having a shut-in, and yes, it will take a little bit of time to get back up and running, and that is the big also risk, the knock-on effect, that once inshallah, there's peace back in the region very soon, that there's still going to be this logistical bottleneck that's built up, the supply, getting those ships back, getting that infrastructure back up and running. It's a slow process. The prices won't come back down as quickly as many may think.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you could argue that the oil price was underpricing the risk of this conflict. Are they still underpricing it?
Well, it's catching up quite quickly now. But yes, but the Qatar minister said that $150 a barrel is a realistic price point, and he's bang on. That's exactly where the risk is going to as the war continues in this situation. While we don't have that 20% of oil and gas flows through that strait, it's a massive problem, and prices will continue to head in that direction. The SPR release will mitigate that to some degree and slow that situation. But you're right. The fact is, we have that oil and water. We have an oversupplied market. But if you hit the Gulf, the key hub for oil supply, and those OPEC producers, then all bets are off.
Final question, Paul. What is more of a threat to Europe, a shortage of gas or oil?
Both.
Well, that's roundabouts and swings, really. But I think gas is probably the bigger issue for a lot of Europe. The fact is, with oil, you've got that storage. That oil crisis of 1973 sharpened the minds of the OECD countries and built that storage up. Europe doesn't have the same levels of storage, 3 to 4 weeks, rather than those 3 months. So, in a sense, there's a bigger buffer in oil than there is in gas. But at the same time, there's a regional market with gas, and I would say that still gas is the bigger risk right now.
Paul, thank you so much, Paul Heaton there, joining us there from London. Well, if you are just joining us, here are the top stories that we're tracking this hour. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson.
Platforms.
House is actually threatening to widen the war. Now, we have heard from U.S. officials that there are some other options on the table. At the moment, it doesn't feel like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is going to be an option to tap, as officials have pointed elsewhere. But we haven't really heard a lot else materialize as those oil prices trickle down to retail gasoline. Scarlett, President Trump met last week with his energy secretary as well as Treasury Secretary to talk about some potential solutions to help domestic consumers when it comes to this, but nothing's really emerged beyond. We heard President Trump offer that idea of risk insurance and naval escorts for those vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. I'll also say quickly, we're hearing here in Washington that potentially the White House could ask Congress for a gas tax holiday, but at this moment, that plan hasn't materialized.
And certainly for the second time in 6 days, Turkey said that it intercepted, or that NATO intercepted, a missile from Iran. What does that tell you, Tyler, in terms of possible timeline here and how widespread this war in the Middle East may go?
Well, it's interesting because Turkey had called for diplomatic efforts to help diffuse the tensions, as we've really seen multiple regional partners be hit by Iranian drones. And we heard from Iran's president actually over the weekend saying that he had instructed the military not to hit those countries that aren't preemptively striking Iran. And he actually apologized to neighboring countries. But then you're seeing still that there has been this ramp up in attacks. It's really just the latest sign of escalation in the region. And of course, we saw the regime choose its new supreme leader. And after that happened, Iran's state media actually reported that the country is preparing to sustain high-intensity fighting. They have enough weapon stockpiles, they say, for the next 6 months, and that we should actually expect to see more advanced and longer-range missiles start to be deployed in the weeks ahead. So at this point, again, no diplomatic off-ramp appears to be in the sights on the table, as both sides are escalating this. I mentioned earlier that President Trump had floated that we could see the U.S. widen this war. He did post on Truth Social over the weekend saying that the U.S. was looking at expanding its list of targets beyond what we've seen, which has really been aimed at military and government sites. The U.S. has maintained that it hasn't gone after infrastructure. The U.S. Energy Secretary said that in terms of energy infrastructure over the weekend in an interview, though it is important to point out that Israel did strike multiple Iranian fuel depots over the weekend.
Also, I believe the president made some comments that suggested that boots on the ground is something that could be under consideration in a very rare instance. Can you elaborate on that?
So he was asked about this directly by reporters on Air Force One, and he said that this isn't an option that he would want to take, that he would only take it if the conditions were right, if the U.S. was able to fully control the situation where American boots were put on the ground, trying to diffuse some of those concerns that we've really heard from members of both sides of the aisle in Congress, as they essentially have voted down their authority to help limit the president's actions when it comes to this. But they do bring up concerns about boots on the ground, and then lawmakers who want to get more involved. But Scarlett, Bloomberg News is reporting that the president is weighing a potential option to send in special forces on the ground to extract Iran's highly enriched uranium. So that's potentially one option on the table that we could see come up.
Tyler, thank you so much for that wrap up. Tyler Kendall is our Bloomberg Washington correspondent here as we try to get our heads around the latest events coming out in this conflict in the Middle East. From New York, this is Bloomberg Intelligence on Bloomberg Radio. Coming up, we're going to speak with Bess Friedman of Brown Harris Stevens on the U.S. housing market.
Central Portugal.
All right, before we go back to Al Jazeera or CNBC, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic, either the veggie cap, which is what I have in my hand, or the powdered version that I have. Taking a good probiotic is going to improve your skin, but it also will improve your brain function and your gut biome and your immune system, bring down inflammation, improve your metabolism. Good health starts at the gut. So please go to my store and get the probiotics, either in the veggie cap form or in the powdered form. And I have a new product for ones that have pain, either muscle pain or headaches or arthritis, joint pain from sports injury. It's called Super Strong Relief. It's a topical. You put it on your skin where the pain is, and within 60 seconds or less, the pain will diminish or go away completely. This will work again for pulled muscles, muscle aches after a workout, joint pain, even headaches. For the headaches, put it on your neck and on your temples and on your forehead to relieve the tension headache. Please go to my store and get the Super Strong Relief. It's a new product, very high quality. Make sure you use discount 5 on any order. All caps, discount the number 5. You get $5 off. All right, let's listen into CNBC.
Been up every day on this war, and as everyone hated the dollar, everyone counted out the U.S. and the end of U.S. exceptionalism. And guess what? The dollar has been the place to be.
Exactly.
Since
Don't bet against the United States.
Which is interesting. We're shared at a time where Treasury.
This is a very important. So, this is very important concept here. The people that ran to EM markets, emerging markets, or the Europe markets or the China markets, thinking they were going to get higher yield in their stocks compared to the S&P 500 this year. Guess what? You're getting destroyed, totally destroyed. This is why I keep on saying, don't bet against the United States. If you follow my advice, you will be better off. And guess what? JP Morgan, back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, stated, never bet against the United States, ever. Okay? So do you think you're smarter than JP Morgan? Probably you're not. Okay? So don't bet against the United States. It's really simple. Buy into the S&P 500 now. All right? Now, can it go down more? Yeah. But there's a fib sequence showing a very strong support level at 6,450. There's also a strong support level at 6,600. It's trading at 6,675. All right. if you have some cash on hand, start buying some shares into the S&P 500. Don't get stupid and buy individual stocks. You're going to get killed. All right? Now, the energy markets, if you've been paying attention and trying to trade natural gas and oil, it's really difficult right now, all right, because of the volatility. As you know, this show has been broadcasting today. UCO has been up and down. Oil has been up and down. Right now, oil is trading at 100. It was trading at 104 not that long ago. All right, so it's volatile. So you got to be careful. You got to pay attention, and you got to risk manage. Risk manage. All right, but don't bet against the United States. You will get killed every time. Every time. All right. Let's listen into Fox News here.
Assets in the Middle East, and you can see the Strait of all of our U.S. military assets in the Middle East, and you can see the Strait of Hormuz there. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with all of oil. Our oil prices are going up. But first, Mike Waltz, who's our U.S. ambassador, he was talking about the conflict and our goals for this conflict and the new leadership, because we were told, some said that the Ayatollah's son was not going to be selected, but 88 people that are part of these clerics that are part of the Assembly of Experts, they voted yesterday. And it signals that they want a hardliner in there. They want someone that has influence with Iran security forces and business networks. Here is Mike Waltz, the U.S. ambassador.
So it has to be someone that we can deal with. It has to be someone that doesn't threaten Americans, attack Americans, and try to attack us and our allies at any given chance. So the president laid out his goals: no nuclear weapons, no long-range ballistic missiles, no ongoing support for its terrorist proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others. And that has to be a regime that we can deal with and stops attacking us in the world.
So, Brian, looks like, as predicted, the regime is not moderating. They have no sense of, I mean, even the supreme leader, the former supreme leader who was destroyed in one of the attacks, didn't even want his son to replace him. That wasn't his plan of action. Yet they have chosen him to be the next leader. So that tells you that the president's campaign has to continue this.
Yeah, but he's already been wounded, number one. And number two is, most Iranians have never heard his voice. He used to be in the military, served in the Iran-Iraq War, worked for the IRGC, and was part of not just this last crackdown on innocent Iranian civilians, but almost all the crackdowns, which turns out, if you protest, he kills you. With a woman without a headdress, when you walk around, he kills you. So this guy is brutal. And the president said, I'm not happy. He also said this to me last night, and he wanted to go out of his way to make this clear. He said, in terms of danger to the region, Iran had thousands of missiles pointed in all these Middle Eastern countries for the last 4 months, most of which have been hit already, by the way. They're going to take over the Middle East. They're going to control it, all of it. UAE, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia. They had 1,200 missiles pointed at these countries. All these nations were afraid of Iran, and they are not anymore. But they had reason to be afraid. We have knocked the hell out of them like no other nation could have, and they still have remnants left. So when the Gulf states are asked, are they shocked? Yes, they are shocked. Number two is they're not going for our bases. Yeah, they hit some of our bases, but they're going for oil refineries. They hit a desalinization plant. This morning they hit a refinery over in Bahrain, and now the Arab states are beginning, the Gulf states are beginning to hit back. And Senator Lindsey Graham is one of the many people who say, you know what, go fight. We'll make room for you. Go in there and start hitting these guys. Iran is truly isolated right now outside, which has been confirmed by the foreign minister, Russia helping them with targets.
That's why when you hear naysayers, why are we involved in this? Why are we going in? Well, because they were producing nuclear weapons, long-range ballistic missiles. We cannot have that, as you heard Mike Waltz talk about. And then the president telling Brian that Iran had thousands of missiles pointed at all these Middle Eastern countries for the last 4 months. So they were on the brink of producing a nuclear war. What did they say? Within 11 days,
Well, yeah,
or
they
within
had
several
enough
weeks?
for, they had enough for 11, they told they had enough, we had
11
420
to
kilograms
yeah.
to make 11 bombs.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you brought up the point of, Brian, the different targets that they're running.
I want to listen to General Keane here. NATO intercepts second Iranian missile headed to for Turkey.
But first, Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin. She's in D.C. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Dana. A seventh U.S. service member died from wounds he received during an Iranian attack targeting Saudi Arabia. The service member was in the process of being transferred to Landstuhl, Germany for further care when he succumbed to his catastrophic injuries. Fox News has learned there have been 8 very seriously wounded U.S. service members, all of them killed and injured during the first wave of Iranian strikes on the first weekend of the operation. Some are still fighting for their lives. Over the weekend, black oil rained over the capital, Tehran, after Israel struck 30 fuel depots in and around the capital. The flames spread through the sewers and down the streets of Tehran, leaving the capital surrounded by apocalyptic scenes of fire and blackened skies. Fox has learned the U.S. was caught off guard by the scale of the Israeli strikes, which hit 30 fuel depots and left terrified Iranian civilians trapped in their homes. Separately, CENTCOM issued a warning to Iranians to stay home and away from crowded areas like markets or funerals because the IRGC is placing mobile missile launchers and one-way attack drones amidst the crowds, knowing the U.S. is likely to strike back, causing civilian deaths. Quote, "This dangerous decision risks the lives of all civilians in Iran since locations used for military purposes lose protected status and could become legitimate military targets under international law." Earlier today, a second Iranian ballistic missile was intercepted over Turkey, where the U.S. has a key base at Incirlik, amidst reports the Russians are providing targeting intelligence to Iran.
Are you receiving any help from Russia?
Well, we have a strategic partnership with Russia.
So that's a yes?
And well, a military cooperation between Iran and Russia is not something new. It's not a secret. It has been in the past and it's still there and will continue in the future.
President Zelensky of Ukraine says a team of Ukrainian counter-drone experts will travel to the Middle East this week to help advise Gulf states and Jordan how to defend against Iran's Shahed drones, which Russia has used to target Ukraine almost every night for the past 4 years. Dana.
Jennifer, thank you.
And Steve Harrigan is joining us live from the Armenia-Iran border as the regime has now chosen a new supreme leader. Steve, good morning to you. That's quite the backdrop behind you there.
Bill, the sun is just dipping down beneath those mountains in northern Iran. I'm on the Armenian side of the border, and across Iran, celebrations have been underway for the announcement of a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. He's a bit of a mystery man, even to many Iranians. 56 years old. What we know is that already his father, mother, son, and wife have been killed in this war. We know he studied religion to the level of mid-level cleric, certainly not a religious scholar. Instead, he spent time in the hardline Republican Guard. He was a member of the Guard and influential in the Guard, where he served as well. He played a key role with the Guard in the recent suppression of protesters in Iran, deadly suppression which killed thousands of Iranians coming out on the street. One British analyst described him as a nasty piece of work. That opinion shared evidently by President Trump, who said he was not acceptable as a leader, also shared by Israel, who said he would be targeted as a leader. And of course, his title, Supreme Leader, is just that, supreme in almost everything. He controls politics, theology, military, strategy, who gets him appointed to what, and yet still a lot unknown about him. A couple of points to keep in mind. Originally, Iran's revolution was against the monarchy, against inherited power. That's exactly what we have here, moving from father to son. A couple of other points. His appointment, clearly a sign of defiance that Iran continues to keep fighting this war. And finally, it's an attempt, a sign to show that despite the attacks, the multiple decapitations of authority, it's an attempt to show that the government here still is functioning. Bill and Dana, back to you.
I guess we'll end up seeing how far the apple falls from the tree here. Steve Harrigan, live near the Iran border for us, the northern part of the country.
All right, right now, the S&P 500 is trading at 6,685. I said that there was a support level at 6,600. Today's trading went as low as 6,636. So pay attention to the support levels, 6,600 and 6,450. All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Goodnight Formula. Goodnight Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower that allow you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. This will help to detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and be well rested. When you have good sleep every night, you're going to slow down the aging process and improve your brain function. Super important. Another great neurostat that I have is Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will allow you to get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate. Take this every day, drink it with filtered water, and over time, what you will notice is that your cognition is going to improve, your memory is going to improve. And what's happening is that you're building better dendritic connections between neurons, and the neurons are communicating better. You're thinking faster. You have better memory. Take Clarity Factor every day. You can take Clarity Factor and Goodnight Formula daily to improve your brain function. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Another great supplement that you should be taking is either Max 35, Max 14, right? Max 35, Max 14, or Cleanse. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. Max 14 is 14 parts per million. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. They're at different price points. Take a teaspoon a day every day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow. What this will do is boost up your innate immune system, help the health of your oral cavity, neutralize, also maintain a mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. When you do that, you're able to weather problems in the winter, the cold season or the allergy season. Or if you're cleaning, doing spring cleaning and it's dusty, take this, to make sure that you're not getting irritation and making sure that you're neutralizing. Good oral hygiene also helps cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Cleanse, take a teaspoon a day, every day, or Max 35 or Max 14, same thing, take a teaspoon a day, every day. If you're not feeling well or you're around someone that's not feeling well, it behooves you to take a tablespoon or 2 a day until everything is all clear and you go back to your maintenance dose. I've been doing this for over 6 years now. Almost 6, over 6 years. Take it every day and boost up that immune system. All right, let's listen into France 24, see if they have anything good.
Whoa, what's that? I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina just built an app.
Impossible. And expanded, becoming the true epicenter of art history for our country and beyond.
Plans include revamping the Eastern Wing.
All right, oil crisis. All right, this is BBC. Let's listen to this.
Let's give you a sense of how it feels in Dubai right now. We can take you to our correspondent, Nick B. Nick, what are the Defence Ministry there saying about their response to what is happening in the skies at the moment?
Hi, Lucy. Well, they say once again they've been in action trying to intercept the latest Iranian missile and drone barrage that's been sent across the water, across the Gulf to here. Life pretty much goes on for the main part. Most of the time, you can see the skyscrapers behind us, the distinctive skyline here. Construction continues, but periodically there are these threats, alerts sent to mobile phones. Saturday night, an illustration of the danger this city still faces when a Pakistani man was killed after falling debris from an interception struck his car, and he was killed. And as you said, once again, more missiles and drones have been sent, and that's a picture that's reflected across the Gulf states. They're trying to work out what to do, Lucy, because so far they've been really absorbing this and they haven't been fighting back. And so there's a calibration there in terms of whether they up the ante or hope that Iran, their neighbor, will really dampen things down and stop lashing out at them.
And Dubai, of course, an international business center, Nick. What's been the reaction from the financial world and from business leaders there to what's going on?
Well, really interesting this, because if you look at the position the UAE are in at the moment, they are an ally of the US. They've moved towards Israel in terms of normalizing relations more than many other countries near here. But now they find themselves in a war that they didn't start. They've been dragged into this. And so there are discussions, no doubt, behind the scenes about what they do. Clearly, this is a place which has built up a reputation as being business-friendly. So many expats live in the vast majority of the population. This sort of image of Dubai as a place which is tax-friendly, that the weather's good, and that business can be done here. They will be concerned in the mid to long term if there are impacts on this reputation. And I mean, we were just out at the coast earlier on today, near the port, and we could, so it's a huge operation there, the busiest port in the Middle East. And on the day that we hear that these oil prices have shot up so much, real concerns about the ramifications for global trade, for supply routes, and what may happen in the weeks to come if this doesn't stop anytime soon. And of course, at the moment, there's no sign of that, Lucy.
And just speaking to people, obviously there will be different opinions, but do most people feel secure at the moment, or is there a sense of fear?
I don't think there's a sense of panic. I think there are daily reminders of the threat that's faced. A lot of people here continue to work. I mean, it's quite striking that the people who've been killed across the Gulf in the past week that this war has been going on have been foreign workers. And I mean, if you look when the alerts come in, quite often construction workers and other people from other countries keep on doing their work. I don't know whether they have an option to go and take shelter or whether it's a decision they make, but that is quite striking. And so, yes, I think some people will be worried, particularly by what we saw on Saturday, Lucy. This drone strike at the airport, and this footage went viral. It could have been catastrophic if this drone, Iranian drone, it would seem, had come down anywhere in a slightly different position, because it landed, it looked like, very, very near to one of the terminal buildings. You could see planes on the tarmac, so things could have been very different there. Interestingly, the authorities after that, they shut the airport and then reopened it pretty quickly afterwards, but there was no public acknowledgement of what had happened here. And all the while, the message is that we're doing all we can to support you, to look after you, and to protect you. But there are daily reminders, and right at the start, when you talk about the number of missiles and drones that are still being fired.
Experience a new benchmark of luxury in the 2026 Infiniti QX80 from Infiniti of White Plains. With its bold stance and refined
Let's return now to central London to West.
Let's take a look at see live now if they have anything.
Those Middle Eastern allies stating that they will not hesitate to respond to Iran's attacks. In terms of alignment, though, because there are strength in numbers, when we take a look at the alignment with Iran, is it really with Russia and China? And is there any concern regarding that trio?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what you're seeing is the complete isolation of Iran within the Middle East. All the other Gulf nations, which are Arab, are turning away from the Persian nation of Iran and siding with Israel and the United States so far in this war. The United Arab Emirates already attacked against Iran, even though I think for a lot of different reasons it's better for these countries to simply let the United States and Israel, the world's most powerful and second most powerful air forces, do all the attacking, so you don't have cases of friendly fire. And this really leaves Iran isolated within its axis. And if you look at who those members of the axis are, China, which has called on the United States and Israel not to target Mojtaba Khamenei, who was the son of the supreme leader, who is now appointed the new supreme leader. We see Russia, which has been potentially providing some degree of support, potentially logistical support to Iran, potentially other countries like North Korea. So you see here that you have the allies that are choosing to join forces, align themselves with the United States and Israel, including most of the Middle East, and this axis, which includes Iran at the center, with other powers like Russia and China.
And Alex, you were mentioning that Iran has named the new successor, the new supreme leader, which is the son of the slain supreme leader who was killed in the initial attack. You know, what does this mean for the region and for who controls Iran right now?
Well, I think that you see that the Islamic Republic still thinks that they have some degree of control, but that control is waning. And when you see the appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the supreme leader, as the next supreme leader, it's an indication that they're not quitting, but it's also an indication that that the United States and Israel are going to continue fighting against this regime. And you can be certain that Mojtaba Khamenei is now on the top, if he wasn't already, of the Israeli target list. The Israelis have stated very clearly that their goal for this war is regime change, while America's been more coy about what that goal is. We saw the President of the United States saying that he would not respect it if Mojtaba was the new supreme leader, that there will not be another Ayatollah leading Iran, and that the President of the United States will have a say in who the future leader of Iran is. So by appointing Mojtaba, you can be certain that none of the allies fighting against Iran will respect it. At the same time, also the Iranians that have been protesting against Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei are already in the streets chanting death to Khamenei, the new Khamenei who's now been appointed supreme leader.
And let's talk about the people in Iran. We've continued to hear from President Trump encouraging them to rise up and take this opportunity. Are there any developments in terms of the civilian population and the steps that they may take in order to overthrow this regime?
Well, so far, President Trump has been telling the Iranians that the help is here, but it's not the time for them to come out into the streets. We're seeing tremendous footage of bombings taking place, active bombings in Tehran and other places. It's very dangerous to be out on the streets right now. The time will come where I think you will see Israel and the United States urging people to go out into the streets as they did in the months and weeks prior to this Operation Epic Fury and Roaring Lion, rather. And the state of Israel has also said that there are some surprises. They said that they have ways to get the Iranians out into the streets. So I think that you're looking at what might potentially be another phase here that we're not yet at, but certainly the United States and Israel want to see a different regime. They want to see the Iranian people take over their country from this fanatical Islamic Republic, and the United States and Israel think that they're giving the Iranian people potentially the only chance that they'll have in a generation to affect that kind of regime change.
And as we're talking about that, you know, you mentioning this could be the opportunity in a generation. Is this the strongest position that the Iranian people have yet seen when it comes to overthrowing this current regime?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see that the first target here, not the last target, the first target was the striking of Ali Khamenei and 40 of his top advisors, which has now been believed to include Khamenei's wife. I think they believed that at the time that Mojtaba Khamenei might have been with his father and was in that room. We have yet to see Mojtaba Khamenei give public remarks yet, certain that he's in hiding if he's still alive. But Israel and the United States, they want to see a regime change. And Mojtaba Khamenei is a continuation of the old. He's not something different.
All right, Alex, we do appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox. We are awaiting the
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the omega-3. This will help to improve your lipid profile. It helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. When you're bringing down LDL levels, you're reducing plaque formation. Super important. Also, omega-3 brings down inflammation. When you're bringing down inflammation at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. Now, omega-3 is super important to take every day. So please, go to my store, take the omega-3, and improve your cardiovascular health. Another great way to improve your cardiovascular health and your immune system is olive leaf extract. And you can take it with the omega-3 synergistically. Now, olive leaf extract will bring down systemic inflammation, boost up that immune system, and also help to control your lipid profile. Very similar to omega-3. Now, by improving your lipid profile, you're reducing the LDL that can be oxidized that leads to plaque formation. So please go to my store, get the olive leaf extract, boost up that immune system and your cardiovascular system, get the omega-3, help with your cardiovascular system. They work synergistically. Please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. And since we are in the cold season and the allergy season, you should be stocking up on lozenges and drops. You can get Manuka honey lozenges or orange splash lozenges with vitamin C. I also have drops in honey and lemon, cherry flavor, and in blueberry. Very high quality drops and lozenges. Make sure you have a few bags at home and at work. You never know when you need them. The moment you have that throat irritation or you're around someone that's not feeling so well, take them right away, improve that barrier for your oropharynx, and you're going to weather the storm better. Please go to my store, get the drops and the lozenges.
We saw some escalation over the weekend, right? So we saw news that some Iran oil facilities were getting hit. We saw news today that Saudi is starting to curtail production. So this, number one, does not de-escalate the situation. And if you don't have the escalation, the market starts to price in not just your regular gradual adjustment that requires a little bit of higher prices, but rather, hey, this massive shock might last longer than we think. So we need to move into demand destruction right now. I think this moving prices to above $100 a barrel signals exactly that. It's this worry that if this lasts longer, the market needs to have a little bit of a more aggressive correction in demand as well.
Is this east-west pipeline, can that be a salve at some point, of some, even if it's only 5 of whatever, 20?
Right.
This is the crazy thing about the crude market, the WTI market. It's $98.77 a barrel right now, and it was trading intraday, since the session opened up as much as 104. This is the volatility that I'm talking about. It's just, it whipsaws back and forth.
It would be a production delay rather than a production loss. I think the fact that they are announcing, we can't do much by the pipeline, and on top of that, we have to start shutting down, that sends a signal that, this is production loss.
Does President Trump have any options when it comes to fighting the higher oil prices?
So there is some SPR that could be used. Today, we saw the headline that the G7 are considering. Exactly. We saw the headline that the G7 are considering maybe releasing some of that, right? And they talked about 300 to 400 million barrels of release being possible. This is not certain yet, but this would buy us time. If you had that type of volume releasing to the market, that's worth about 18 days of this disruption.
On other types of commodities that go through the Strait, the fertilizers and the sulfuric acids and the things that feed into crops and industrial goods, is that as big a concern as oil itself?
It's a growing concern. For example, if we move to liquefied natural gas, in the same way that you have 20% of oil volumes crossing the strait under normal times, you normally have 20% of global LNG supply crossing the strait. And natural gas is a huge component in the production of fertilizer. So even out in Asia, we're starting to get headlines of producers of fertilizer having to shut down because they cannot access natural gas. One option would be to use naphtha instead of natural gas. But if you don't have enough oil, or if naphtha is too expensive, you can't do that either. So yes, it is a growing concern that it's going to impact other markets as well.
So how do you make a forecast on oil prices right now without knowing what the end game is here?
We have to work with scenarios, and I think this is, in a way, it's what the market is doing as well, right? This rally that we saw from last week, to your point, like the price action right now has stepped up. What does that mean? It means this increased concern with demand destruction, which also means that if we have headlines that suggest maybe de-escalation, some of that risk premium might come off. So the uncertainty about the duration of the disruption is really key here.
Ultimately, though, in a year from now, where do you think prices will be?
Well, we think that the prices will be much more normalized, but it's hard to escape a sort of long-term impact on stocks. This is such a large disruption that even if it's fixed after 4 weeks, yeah, we're likely to start next year with lower oil inventories than what we would have otherwise.
So there is a longer term disruption here going on.
Yes, it's not massive. It's something that we can compensate for over time, but it's just that the scale of what's happening now is just so massive. And if you think about how, for example, U.S. production could offset that. U.S. production can be very prolific. It's very cheap. It's short cycle, but even that short cycle is 9 to 12 months. It's a few quarters, right? So it's something that over time can show up and can respond to high prices, but not overnight.
Right. Which kind of brings us to some of the commentary from Scott Sheffield last week, or even the backwardation that there's a belief this will get better, right? Among market participants, at least.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just that because we don't know when, you end up having to price in a bigger demand destruction right now, just in case.
Samantha, thank you. Always good to talk to you. Samantha Dart over at Goldman.
Up next, how to think about oil and commodities as a risk hedge during the current volatility. Neuberger Berman's Holly Newman-Croft has that for us.
How could the move in oil impact airlines? Could a prolonged spike in jet fuel price slow down new production, let's say? We'll talk to the CEO of Airbus North America when Money Movers comes right back.
All right, let's listen into, I want to listen to Fox Business here. This is a 7-minute segment.
That's a full-time job all by itself. But here's the thing, you built.
Welcome back. Good Monday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I hope you're having a good Monday. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Monday, March 9th. It is 7:02 on the East Coast. Coming up this hour in 10 minutes time, the Word on Wall Street panel is here with Haider Rafiq and Mike Lee. Don't miss it. At 7:20, New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney will join me. And then at 7:30, my exclusive with GE Aerospace CEO and Chairman Larry Culp. Big move in that stock. You want to join me for that. But first, time for the hot topic of the hour, and that is the oil shock driving markets. Brent and crude reaching above $100 a barrel for the first time in 3 years. Brent is up 45% in a week. Crude up 53% in a week as the Middle East conflict disrupts production and shipping. President Trump is pushing this government-backed insurance program to tackle the rising price of oil and alleviate pressure in the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil transports through every day. The program would lower war risk premiums for vessels while the government absorbs part of the major losses, easing pressure on private insurance companies and ship owners. I spoke with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Rick Crawford, yesterday about how tankers have been reluctant to go through the strait because they can't get insurance. Watch.
The actuaries have said we're not going to write insurance on that anymore. So there's going to have to be some physical security measures implemented if we're going to continue to see that oil transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. This is not unlike what happened in 1988 when the Iranians mined the strait, and President Reagan had to take kinetic action to not only
Right. I was going to mention this. This is really important for ones that are listening. Later, when you have time, watch some clips or podcasts about tanker wars. It's called Tanker Wars. This happened during Reagan's administration when Iraq and Iran were at war with each other. And there were tankers that were being knocked out. The U.S. military came in, and the operation, I believe, was called Operation Praying Mantis. And it involved our Navy SEALs and Navy aircraft carrier. I think it was the Enterprise, and the fighter jets. It also involved either destroyers or, yeah, I think it was some of our destroyers. We had destroyers in the region. But this is reminiscent of this. That's probably the best analog that we can look at in recent history. So it's a fascinating operation and how the Navy conducted it. But again, it's different. Now it's the United States against Iran, and Iraq, wasn't at war with Iran. So it's a little different. And we knocked out a lot of their capability. Back then, you didn't have drone warfare. And back then, you also had the worry about Russia and the Cold War getting, heated up, and Russia getting involved. Russia is aligned with Iran. So these countries and their geopolitical alignment goes all the way back to the Cold War. But it's a fascinating operation. I believe it was called Operation Praying Mantis. It was during the Reagan administration, where it was a pretty extensive naval battle that was happening in the region. Another thing that is interesting is that Trump mentioned about the insurance, that the United States would insure these tankers, these oil tankers, to go through and not get hit. But at the very beginning, he was also telegraphing that the Navy would escort these tankers. Well, experts in shipping, which I'm not an expert at shipping, but experts at shipping are saying there's not enough Navy vessels in the U.S. inventory to be able to do this and to conduct operations against Iran, because you have the frigates that are shooting missiles, right? And they're conducting operations. They don't have time to escort oil tankers back and forth through the Strait of Hormuz. So the United States probably is going to not escort, but insure. But who's going to take the chance of multiple million-dollar tankers that could get hit by a drone or some sort of missile by Iran when they're not being escorted by the military? So even if you insure, even if the government insures these tankers, the ones that own the tanker aren't going to risk their asset. There's the problem. So oil is still going to go up. So let's listen in. So those are some behind the scenes of what's kind of going on in the background. And you have to pay attention that just because the headline news seems that oil will go down because Trump says this, well, the reality is that we don't have enough Navy vessels to escort and conduct operations. And are we going to risk our Navy vessels? Because we need to maintain our inventory for a potential war with China. So I don't know. I think the Strait of Hormuz is going to be clogged up for a while. So oil should continue to go up. But right now, for some reason, I can't tell you why, but for some reason, oil now is trading at $98.36 a barrel for WTI. But it's been trading very volatile. You know, there's a lot of volatility today in the oil market.
Forms in the process, and that was the beginning. That was the predicate of what you're seeing today. And finally, we have a president that says, not on my watch, we're going to do it, and end this regime and clear that Strait of Hormuz and make sure that the oil flows to the rest of the world. It's an important corridor because China gets somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of the Iranian oil that comes through there goes to China. So this has global impact in ways that we don't even necessarily understand. But I think the president understands that he's going to do everything he can to physically secure that strait.
And the president is doing that. He talked about the oil spike on Truth Social last night. He writes, the short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over, is a very small price to pay for the USA and the world's safety and peace. President Trump also asked about tapping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to ease pressure. SPR levels are up better than 5% over the year in the president's second term. Let's get into it. Mike Lee, should the president be tapping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? If he puts more oil on the market, wouldn't that pressure prices lower?
Yeah, Maria, I think the key is getting the Straits of Hormuz open. But on that note, the finance ministers of the G7 nations are meeting today about a coordinated strategic release through the International Energy Agency. So we should see some accommodation here, and I believe these price spikes to be short-term. I mean, if it's elongated, yes, that could be a solution. I don't know that it's necessary in the next few days to do that, because if you go back to 1990, all the major conflicts in the Middle East, if you go out 90 days, the average price movement on a barrel of oil is 0.1%. So these things tend to normalize themselves over time. And so what I think the market and short-term trading is all about is security, about getting those shipping lanes open. And I believe if we're not there right now, we should be there relatively soon, given the destruction that that's happened to the Iranian Navy as well as their defense mechanisms.
Yeah, and the president put a timeline on this. He expects that perhaps this could be going on for a total of 4 or 5 weeks. Isn't that interesting that coincides almost exactly to his trip to Beijing, which begins at the end of March 31st. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham joined me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures, and I asked him about the potential of retaliation from the UAE and Saudi Arabia because Iran struck them. Is this war going to widen out into a family affair among Gulf nations? Watch this.
I want them to get in the fight. We sell them weapons. Iran is striking their country. They have good capability. About the Strait of Hormuz, Donald J. Trump is going to bring this terrorist regime down. We're going to have partners in Iran, and we're going to open up a gateway to peace. This won't fix itself. Every other president has talked about doing it. President Trump is in the process of doing it. They're going to lose, and we're going to win. In the United States, you just wait to see what comes in the next 2 weeks.
The next 2 weeks meaning what?
We're going to blow the hell out of these people. This regime is in a death row now. It is going to be on its knees. It's going to fall, and when it falls, we're going to have peace like no other time. We're going to have prosperity unlike anyone could ever imagine. Peace brings prosperity. You can't do it by talking. The Democrats criticize this operation. They didn't do a damn thing. These men and women in the military should make us all proud.
Cheryl, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said that the worst.
This market is crazy. Now the oil is at 95 handle, 95.70. What the hell's going on? It's crazy.
Yet to come for Iran, and that the U.S. has not even used its 2,000-pound bombs. It looks like it's going to get pretty heavy in the coming couple of weeks.
Well, it depends on what Iranian defense forces even have left because of the strikes that we've done. We've done 3,000 strikes in Iran in 9 days. That is unbelievable. And we've already used 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs. We haven't even gotten to those larger bombs that the secretary was talking about. Their Speaker Johnson last week said, look, the time frame, we are winning, we are doing really well. But I will say that to Secretary Hegseth's credit, he didn't go on last night, on 60 Minutes and say, I'm not going to fly some mission accomplished banner. This will be over when President Trump says it is over. And President Trump has been very clear, this is not going to be a long, drawn-out war. By the way, this isn't the 1970s with oil, Maria. I got to say this. Look, the vast majority of oil we consume in this country is U.S. and Canadian production. So that should be, I hope Americans understand that better.
Yeah, so actually the U.S. is going to be making more.
But we have 5 different petroleum area designated defense areas called PADs, all right? PAD 1 through 5. PAD 3, which is in Texas, needs heavy crude. We don't make heavy crude at large quantities in the United States. That's the reason why we had to take Venezuela. Now think about it. A lot of people think that maybe Iran was just, a operation that wasn't really thought out, or we were pushed into it because of the Israelis. I don't think so. It's not a coincidence that we went into Venezuela to get the heavy crude to be able to use it as feedstock in our refineries in PAD 3 in Texas and Louisiana. All right? So we didn't have to depend on the medium or heavy crude that's coming out of the Middle East. A lot of people don't pay attention to the details. We needed to take out Venezuela, control its oil before we hit Iran. And guess what? If we win this Operation Epic Fury, which I think we will, then we have held China's energy. Now people would say, well, China can just get its energy from Russia. Well, guess what? Most of that energy that they're getting is only through the northern passageway. And that is only during July to October. China is in a world of hurt in terms of energy. And that's not by mistake. Take out Venezuela, take out Iran, and it weakens China so they don't attack Taiwan. If they do attack Taiwan, they don't have the energy to conduct the war efficiently. Genius. All right. Let's listen into Bloomberg Radio here.
So for years, Iran and Qatar have developed a cordial relationship, strategic relationship based on pragmatism, because they share a large field, the world's largest gas field. And in order to produce this field, they need to have coordination, joint management. So there is an entente, confidential agreement between Iran and Qatar to develop this field. Now that we have this conflict ongoing, not only it raises new uncertainties for the expansion of Qatar, LNG, which is ongoing, and the world is expecting it with anticipation to get cooler prices in 2 years from now. And at the same time, we have this uncertainty because nobody knows what comes next in Iran and whether the new future
Iranian government will honor this arrangement that govern the joint field.
I want to ask a question I haven't really heard a lot of people ask, and that is, are the oil markets overreacting? And I ask that because now oil is a much smaller part of GDP than it was a few decades ago when we had the energy crisis of the 1970s. And also the US is the world's largest oil producer. So why are we seeing the reaction? Or maybe we should be seeing a more aggressive reaction, but I'm asking you, the expert.
So
Let me see if she says it, because we don't know what she's going to say. But it has a lot to do with the refineries. They're designed to take certain feedstocks. And many of the refineries are designed to take medium to heavy crude. So they can't just take American light sweet crude oil. The refineries aren't designed for it. So a lot of the chemistry and the petroleum engineering for the refineries are fine-tuned based on the feedstocks that they receive. That's why.
Summer, we already had the 12-day war. We had a spike in prices, and then prices revert back rapidly. The duration of the conflict will really impact how long we'll see higher prices on oil. There are mitigation strategies that are going to be developed fast. Even the US government right now announced a shipping reinsurance for maritime, because right now the problem is the Strait of Hormuz for oil. That's the biggest problem.
She's not answering the question.
Heating of infrastructure, strikes on infrastructure, oil infrastructure. But the transit of the Strait of Hormuz is a big, handicap right now for trade. And if between escorts plus insurance, because the war premiums are to the roof and nobody can travel right now.
What about pipelines? I mean, the answer is, I know that in Qatar there's the Dolphin pipeline, which is, the basic pipeline, but there's all sorts of pipelines that haven't been built. Is this war, for whatever reason, the catalyst for that area to grow up and put in a pipeline infrastructure?
Yes.
That's such a good question, because for years there has been discussion potentially of Qatar building a pipeline, gas pipeline via Syria and heading towards Europe, basically.
Right.
To the Mediterranean, via the Mediterranean.
So is this the catalyst for that?
It could potentially be a big trigger. However, as you know, it's an unstable region. We need
right now. Pay attention to what she's saying. All right, because it's all about energy in geopolitical maneuvering. All right, and the transnational capitalists, especially for natural gas. Qatar is working on a natural gas field. Now they're developing LNG to ship it, but you also may want to develop a pipeline and get it into the Mediterranean, so you don't have to deal with the Strait of Hormuz, and get it into Europe. Well, Russia's not going to like that because of Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2, and the pipelines that are going through Ukraine. A lot of people don't understand this whole Ukraine war with Russia. It's all about energy. It's not about nationalism and and the history of Russia. It's all about energy. If you don't believe me, you need to start paying attention. All right? Now, Russia is aligned with Iran. If they can keep and prevent these nations building, the United States or the Gulf nations working together and building a pipeline going through Syria or maybe even going through Turkey and getting into Europe, then Europe isn't buying Russian oil or Russian natural gas. And that changes the whole dynamic, especially for the Ukraine war.
And also there is increasingly more gas in the Mediterranean that would be competing with this gas.
Leslie Paulton Guzman on this key question. Is the United States Navy going to provide escort service through the Gulf of
Yeah, that's what
Hormuz.
President Trump's been saying.
Yes, I
No,
think
they
we're
can't do it.
increasingly, and not just potentially from the US, but I think additional power see it as an opportunity to reopen the sea routes that have been hijacked by either the Houthi in Yemen
Okay, but
or
wouldn't
like.
our boats be sitting targets, sitting ducks?
Yes.
So it all depends on what's left in terms of weaponaries from Iran, and it's hard to gauge. But drones, missiles, we saw potentially mines. But I think the U.S. military plus the Israeli plus France is sending an aircraft carrier. We heard some Greek, also Navy going.
Yeah,
in.
didn't they shut their a few boats that are taking on this risk and coming from Greece? I guess are saying they're shutting off however that people could find out where they are. I guess their radar, they're shutting that off and sort of in essence going through the straight blind.
And this is where, dismantling this kind of rogue state axis,
right?
Because they get intelligence and weapon sharing from China, from Russia,
right?
And those are actors that are, malevolent and are impeding the global trade.
Right, I got one time for one more question. I freshened up my chart of oil in $2026. We've had other occurrences of $120, $130 per barrel in $2026. Can you see a further spike up from 105?
So to come back to Alex's question earlier, I think that the fact that the U.S. now is one of the largest producers of oil,
yeah.
We have increasingly non-OPEC supply. That's a buffer. And that's also, why the timing of the strike, maybe a few years ago, it would have been impossible to do that. I think there is a buffer, but again, the duration of the war will be critical.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex is really important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. This will help to improve the health of your mitochondria, help with the electron transport chain to produce ATP so you have more energy. Vitamin B complex helps with the cellular metabolism and helps to protect neurons through vitamin B12. Really important to take every day, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. You want to protect your neurons. Now, resveratrol. Resveratrol soaks up free radicals, helps the health of your mitochondria so you'll have more energy. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression and helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. Resveratrol also helps the basal layer for your skin. Resveratrol helps you to slow down the aging process. It works really well with C60. So please go to my store, get the resveratrol, stack it with C60. Now, vitamin D. Vitamin D3 is really important to take every day. It will help, especially if you take in calcium and do resistance training to build denser bone. Vitamin D3 is a gene expression cofactor, so your cells will perform properly. And vitamin D3 is super important to take because if a cell is infected, it helps for the cell to go into apoptosis. This is really important, especially during the 2020 crisis and during the cold season. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin D3. All right, let's listen into CNBC.
Pretty simple. There are I'd say three ways you can not solve, but you can extend a timeline, a keeping timeline that's working against us right now. Number one would be, I think, a coordinated release of global SPR. And number two, I think you need to see, a true ceasefire would be another thing. And then the third way to delay this, and I don't think it's really politically palatable, is to have military escorts through the Strait of Hormuz to make sure that we put these flows back. And so I think there are two temporary solutions, which is adding SPR to the market and military escorts. Then there's one permanent, and that's that we declare that we have a peace agreement and move away from this conflict.
I will just note, as the markets come back, oil prices have come well off the highs as well. Crude oil now is up only 6%, and Brent only 6.5%. It was up double that amount earlier this morning. Warren and Treasuries are now rallying a little bit. I guess the point that's hard to figure out is, given we came into this year on a pretty solid economic footing, expecting these tax refunds and also lower gas prices, at what point does the calculus change where it really becomes a problem for the consumer and for the overall economy? Because we had a lot of tailwinds going in.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me how long we thought this was going to last, then I could give you like an answer of how everything should be priced. But that's what we're all trying to balance right now. It's oddly familiar to similar to last year, the tariff drama and Liberation Day, and I think there were a lot of people who learned this lesson, like, hey, don't sell the whole.
How to find the right
Panic, Trump's going to have your back. Now, I still think that's probably the way out here, but if this thing goes 2 weeks, I'd say I'll put an even more finer point on it. If we get to the end of this week and there isn't a signal that the administration and globally, governments globally aren't really worried about trying to get that flows back through the boost, then you're going to see, in my opinion, outright panic in the crude oil market. And so that will be a pretty quick test of that, the investor resolve. And so I think by the end of this week, you need to start seeing policymakers respond. And then there's people talking about this summer. There's no way the economy will make it through that. I think that the most you could have is if you a combination of those solutions I laid out, SPR releases, some kind of military intervention straight. The next thing you know, you could have 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks to solve this, to wrap the conflict up. But that's it. After that, I think you start talking about killing the consumer, all those good things you're talking about coming into the year. They're not going to be able to fight against what if we had like $7, $8 gasoline at the pump or $10 diesel, which is where you probably need to go in order to kill.
Until we get to that point, Warren, that's why the market's treating it as an inflationary event, not an economic event, where it's higher treasury yields, more inflation risk, fewer Fed cuts.
Yeah, absolutely. So like $100, $120 oil, like truthfully, we can live with it. It does take away some of the consumer surplus that we've been living with and the oil dividend and things like that. And yeah, the Fed might not be able to cut as much. So, but I think you can live with that. But that's not where we're going if this problem isn't resolved. And that's why I think there's a big disconnect between people who understand the oil market and then generalists right now. Because if you understand the oil market, you understand all these things take time. If you shut in production in the Middle East, if you decide to release barrels from the SPR, especially in the United States, these things take time. And so we're up against a clock here. And if we don't hit the window that's open to start pulling some of those policy levers, then what's going to happen is prices go to levels that ration demand. So right now, yeah, we're worried about inflation, we're worried about the Fed. But the next thing you know, we're talking about global export bans and things like that to try to save and ration energy at each country to get ugly quickly. So that's the next step. Yeah.
And on a retail gas level, really quick, Warren, the price that you think would destroy that kind of demand are prices per gallon that we don't really see in this country, at least.
Yeah, 10% of global demand. That's 10 million barrels a day is what the flow that's been cut off. And so that's where prices have to go to kill that. And it's kind of a ridiculous thing, but yeah, like $8 gasoline, $10 diesel fuel, that's what we're doing. And it's like the equivalent of $350 to $400 crude oil or per barrel of those refined products. I mean, crude oil could be trading at, I don't know, 200 or 150, it doesn't matter. But those refined products, that's what's going to kill demand because that's what the economy runs off of. Now, that's not my base case. I would sure think that it's political suicide going into a midterm year to let this thing run and be that cavalier about the prices. But if we run the math and we say we need to fill 10% of global demand, that's where it has to go. That's why it's, sooner rather than later it would be better for the markets.
Yeah. Warren, appreciate it as always. Good to chat. Warren Pies.
So Ed, McKinsey, look with a new look at how CEOs are handling geopolitical turmoil. We'll get into that with the head of McKinsey in 2 minutes.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver toothpaste. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize, improve your oral cavity, and with good oral hygiene, you're helping your cardiovascular and your valvular health. Very important. This has no fluoride. It's the best toothpaste that you can get. Go to my store, get a few tubes of this toothpaste, use it every day. It has structural nanosilver, and it's going to help to neutralize. Super important, especially during the cold season. And any season has certain things floating around. And the structural nanosilver gels. I have it in the tube form and the quick dispenser called Renew, right? Very high quality, use them the same way. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, put it on that lesion. They'll help to heal it quicker. You can apply the structural nanosilver gel every day on your skin to improve the health of your skin. And if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your ears, around your eyes, around your mouth, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. You can't do that with Perel. This is very high quality. Please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver gels, either in the quick dispenser or in the tube form. Make sure you use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video. All right, let's listen into the BBC.
Kind of any sort of rethink from the UK government on that in terms of policy?
Well, you're right, Will. We do have a lot of oil and gas, but the truth is that since about the mid-noughties, we've been net importers of oil and gas because we use more than we're actually able to produce. Also, there's different types of grades, right? And some of the forms, like, for example, jet fuel, we have to import. We don't actually refine the right kind of stuff ourselves. So it's a bit of give and take. And if you start cancelling, outgoing contracts, then imagine what the repercussions could be like. So there is a case for saying, well, this is something that perhaps when the government thinks about our future energy policy, we should be thinking about that and how we should deal with it. Us being self-sufficient in energy, that's a bigger question. But right now, when we talk about our position in oil and gas, yes, we produce a lot. A lot of it goes elsewhere. We get a lot in from overseas. But the good news at the moment, if you're in the UK, it doesn't look like we're facing by any means any kind of crisis.
Bill, a question that relates to what we saw only yesterday in Iran, especially in Tehran itself, because interrupting oil supplies is one thing, and that has an impact on price. We've discussed that, but targeting infrastructure.
This restaurant, when it is moving, moves like an orchestra. When you are able to step outside of your perception of...
We saw those extraordinary explosions and fires in Tehran. If we go down that route and there is more retaliation and more strikes, where does that take us?
I think we're already there. I mean, as Barbara was explaining, the targeting by Iran of Arab Gulf state energy infrastructure has been happening for days now. And it hasn't been particularly effective, but they could get lucky and do some serious damage. If Iran's infrastructure being attacked it seems to be part of the US and Israeli plan, and I can only think that will encourage more widespread spreading of this whole conflict to other neighboring countries. And there is, of course, the danger that that air routes and pipelines and refineries and terminals all come under fire. Now, that obviously is going to just create more of a supply shock one way or another, and that's just going to continue to build until this conflict starts to ease.
Bill, we're just going to put onto the screen some of those pictures from Tehran, because in terms of targeting that infrastructure, it caused huge explosions in the capital. Hopefully those pictures will come in a moment or two, but whilst we wait, Barbara, let me turn to a separate area, because we've also seen water desalination targets targeted, and Iran has responded. There's massive risks with that as well.
This is a very new and alarming development. Yes, the Iranians say that they were attacked, their desalination plant was attacked, and the foreign minister said that affected water supply to 30 villages. They believed, or they said, that this attack was launched from a U.S. base in Bahrain, and they responded by attacking a desalination plant in Bahrain, something that the ruler there called unprecedented and inexcusable. And both of them have a point, really, because desalination plants are crucial for this region. It's a desert region. There are hundreds of these plants scattered around the Gulf. Some of them, Kuwait gets 90% of its drinking water from desalination plants. So if they get brought into the mix for attacks, that could have an enormous impact. And you did have this, the Iranian officials saying after the weekend, look, if Israel and the U.S. are going to start attacking our infrastructure, we will broaden our attacks on regional infrastructure. Now, I think they were talking mostly about oil, but if we've seen the desalination plants have been hit, you can imagine that could get bigger as well, and that will be very traumatic, very difficult for the region.
Bill, I've got a question from Keith, and many others have made the point about why prices go up so quickly, but then take quite a long time to come down.
Yeah, that does seem to be a bit of an underlying feature. For example, we're still not down to normal gas prices in Europe after the 2022 shock. That seems to be an embedding of inflation that seems to happen in these situations. I think maybe that question also reflects concerns about the fact that at the fuel pump, those prices, retail prices, seem to go up quicker than they come down. I think that's something more to do with how those fuel retail companies, particularly in the UK, are regulated, not so much to do with the underlying price. One thing to say is that, you know, if peace was to break out and there was to be some sort of political breakthrough here, you would see these prices fall very, very, very quickly.
Darshini, you touched upon it a little earlier, and we've had numerous questions. Janice has sent in a question, Naima has sent in a question. They are talking about and asking the question, isn't oil pre-bought, and aren't there laws against profiteering? So take both of those questions.
Really good question. You might be wondering why it is you're always seeing prices going up, because when we talk about the price of oil, we're not talking about the price of contracts for delivery in the future, not right now. But when you look at the movements in the markets, the vast majority of what you're seeing is actually to do not with someone wanting to physically buy a barrel of oil, but with speculation, right? So why is it that we've seen this impact? It's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at what's going on, Matthew, it does seem to be a case that retailers perhaps are thinking, right, this is the direction of travel, I'm going to have to cover my back. Most of them already have hedging strategies in place. You know, they pre-buy this stuff, they try to smooth out bumps, but this is perhaps an unforeseen spike. Does that mean they're profiteering? Well, we've had various regulators in various countries expressing concern about perhaps the size of profit margins that are happening. And for example, here in the UK, there's been moves afoot not to legislate against putting prices up, but to say, right, we're going to try and increase competition. What does that mean? They've brought in things like, there's a thing called the Fuel Finder, where you're able to go and check to see what petrol prices are in your area and try and find the cheapest retailer. And the thinking seems to be amongst the regulators, well, we'll hope that competition will do the job for us. In Australia, for example, they say, and this has been a question very recently, the market is allowed to set its own price, but there are rules that say you have to be able to explain why you've done what you've done, and if they find that you've fallen foul of that, then you could be in trouble.
You talked about regulators. That takes me neatly to my next question, and it comes from Denise, who says she is 73 and has seen heating oil treble in price just in the 10 days of this war. A lot of concern about heating oil, and actually the regulators on that side of things have issued a statement even in the last few minutes, haven't they?
If you forgive me, I'll read it out because it's probably worth us reading it out. And this is from the Acting Executive Director for Consumer Protection at the CMA, the regulator, who says, we know the situation in the Middle East is putting pressure on heating oil prices, and we recognise that this will worry people who may find it hard to afford these extra costs. Generally, we would expect that customers who have placed orders for heating oil should receive it at the agreed price. Suppliers should be clear what they're charging and the terms must be fair. We won't hesitate to take action if we suspect that consumer or competition law is being broken. Now, that is, of course, not the same as saying, like, we're going to go in there and stop your prices going up in the same way. So we're really sorry for the people who've been asking these questions. I know there's a lot of concern out there, particularly in rural areas where they rely on heating oil, but this regulator is saying they're keeping a close eye on it.
Yes, it's recognition that that is a concern. Let me bring Bill back in, because we've seen across the decades we've had various conflicts and spikes in oil prices. The question here about what is the highest that oil prices have hit previously, and how high could they go this time?
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question, really, isn't it? It's so the highest that they've ever gone was in the run-up to the 2008 financial crisis, when we had that sort of commodities boom, and they went up. Brent futures went up to $147 before coming back down again. There's been some research out this morning from Goldman Sachs saying prices could go to 150 or beyond before we start to see the sort of demand destruction that would level things out and balance the market. So, but really nobody knows at this point. And also, we don't really know. It may not just be contained as a supply problem in the Gulf, that it could actually become a broader regional conflict that could draw in other players like Turkey. So there are an awful lot of question marks at the moment, and it's very difficult for market players to do anything more than to hedge their bets, hold on to the oil that they've got, and try and get what they can at whatever price they can get it.
Barbara, let me bring you into a tangential question, but could there be a fundamental bottom line for the Gulf states as long as they host US bases in their territory? Does it ultimately get to a choice of doing that, or basically undermining their whole business model?
Well, that's a good question. It's true that the Gulf states have, over the past decades, invested in American military infrastructure, presumably the idea being that American bases buy American protection, and that's being challenged right now. Analysts say it's not realistic to think that that is going to change. They're very bought into it, the Gulf states, and also there's really no viable alternative. The Chinese don't provide that in terms of military defense infrastructure. They're the largest economic partner, but they wouldn't be able to do what the Americans do, neither the Russians. So it's unrealistic to think that that would change, but it is something that the Gulf states are very much preoccupied with, how this is going to affect their economies long term. Obviously, the oil and gas, as we've discussed, but they have also diversified from hydrocarbons by turning themselves into these financial and travel hubs, and that is hugely affected by the perception, by security, and by the perception of insecurity. So how do they deal with that? I mean, at the moment, they are absorbing the attacks. They're calling for an end to them. They're not keen to get involved to strike back, because they feel, probably correctly, that that will just increase the number of attacks against them, although none of them have ruled it out. They do talk about trying to de-escalate through diplomacy, but at the same time saying there's really not very many avenues for that under the current circumstances. None, it seems. That there was an attempt at the weekend which failed, and so I think that they are very much, wondering where this is going to go and what their options are going to be if it continues for any length of time.
Bill, a quick final thought, because a lot of searches online about Karg Island tell people about how important that is to Iran, and could the Americans try to seize it?
Who knows what the Americans are going to do? I think Karg's very important for the Iranian oil industry. It's the major marine terminal. It's in the northern part of the Gulf, and it's got a huge storage capacity, about 30 million barrels. And given that Iranian exports under normal circumstances are only about 1.5 million barrels a day, that's quite a lot. It is the primary place where they load tankers and send them out to the world. So if the US is threatening some sort of attack, that would immobilize theoretically any Iranian exports. But I would say probably they're not able to move shipping at the moment in easily anyway, because of the presence of the US fleet and also the threats that they've made will be against other shipping, but it'll be difficult for them to, I would have thought, sell their vessels as well.
Darshini, a quick final thought, because the EU has warned recently, if this goes on for a long time, a stagflation shock for the world economy.
It's not just the EU. I think, generally speaking, when we look at what's going on in markets here, if it's sustained, you could see inflation heading not back up to where we were in the Ukraine war, but definitely derailing that fall inflation we've seen of late.
Darshini, thanks for that. Thanks for being so brief, because we are out of time. So my thanks to Darshini, to Bill, and to Barbara, and thanks to you for all the questions that you've sent in. You're watching BBC News 2. Stay right up to date. This story is moving all the time, so the website constantly with all the latest details. So until next time. Bye.
Let's give you a sense of how it feels in Dubai right now. We can take you to our correspondent, Nick Beek. Nick, what are the Defence Ministry there saying about their response to what is happening in the skies at the moment?
Hi, Lucy. Well, they say once again they've been in action trying to intercept the latest Iranian missile and drone barrage that's been sent across the water, across the Gulf to here. Life pretty much goes on for the main part. Most of the time, you can see the skyscrapers behind us, the distinctive skyline here. Construction continues, but periodically there are these threats, alerts sent to mobile phones. Saturday night, an illustration of the danger this city still faces when a Pakistani man was killed after falling debris from an interception struck his car, and he was killed. And as you said, once again, more missiles and drones have been sent, and that's a picture that's reflected across the Gulf states. They're trying to work out what to do, Lucy, because so far they've been really absorbing this and they haven't been fighting back. And so there's a calibration there in terms of whether they up the ante or hope that Iran, their neighbour, will really dampen things down and stop lashing out at them.
And Dubai, of course, an international business centre, Nick. What's been the reaction from the financial world and from business leaders there to what's going on?
Well, really interesting this, because if you look at the position the UAE are in at the moment, they are an ally of the US. They've moved towards Israel in terms of normalizing relations more than many other countries near here. But now they find themselves in a war that they didn't start. They've been dragged into this. And so there are discussions, no doubt, behind the scenes about what they do. Clearly, this is a place which has built up a reputation as being business friendly. So many expats live here, the vast majority of the population. This sort of image of Dubai as a place which is tax friendly, that the weather's good, and that business can be done here. They will be concerned in the mid to long term if there are impacts on this reputation. And I mean, we were just out at the coast earlier on today, near the port. And we could, it's a huge operation there, the busiest port in the Middle East. And on the day that we hear that these oil prices have shot up so much, real concerns about the ramification for global trade, for supply routes, and what may happen in the weeks to come if this doesn't stop anytime soon. And of course, at the moment, there's no sign of that, Lucy.
And then just speaking to people, obviously there will be different opinions, but do most people feel secure at the moment, or is there a sense of fear?
I don't think there's a sense of panic. I think there are daily reminders of the threat that's faced. A lot of people here continue to work. I mean, it's quite striking that the people who've been killed across the Gulf in the past week that this war has been going on have been foreign workers. And I mean, if you look when the alerts come in, quite often construction workers and other people from other countries keep on doing their work. I don't know whether they have an option to go and take shelter or whether it's a decision they make, but that is quite striking. And so, yes, I think some people will be worried, particularly by what we saw on Saturday, Lucy. This drone strike at the airport, and this footage went viral. It could have been catastrophic if this Iranian drone, it would seem, had come down anywhere in a slightly different position, because it landed, it looked like, very, very near to one of the terminal buildings. You could see planes on the tarmac, so things could have been very different there. Interestingly, the authorities after that, they shut the airport and then reopened it pretty quickly afterwards, but there was no public acknowledgement of what had happened here. And all the while, the message is that we're doing all we can to support you, to look after you, and to protect you. But there are daily reminders, and right at the start, when you talk about the number of missiles and drones that are still being fired, the danger is real.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This is a month's supply. You mix it with soft foods like hummus or yogurt, applesauce. You can also mix it with a smoothie, with filtered water, or even with milk. But take it every day. This will improve your skin, your hair, your nails, your musculature, your bone density, and your joints. It's really important to take every day. This collagen is very high quality. So please go to my store, get the collagen, do a little bit of resistance training. Also, get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. This is really important to help to improve your endocrine system, your immune system, brain function, help you to recover after a workout, help with your vascular health. By bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals, you're helping a lot of your different organ systems, and you're going to slow down the aging process. Take this every day. This is a month's supply. Again, you can mix it with soft foods, filtered water, smoothie, or even with just milk. Please go to my store, get the heirloom barley, and stack it with the collagen. Make sure you do a little bit of resistance training. It's important to bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body regularly. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg here.
S&P 500, they are somewhat comfortable with they're going to get the upside, they're going to get the downside. But people in the past haven't had access to something that they can get most of the upside, but they don't have to take the downside. That's what the buffers do for you. You know, you buffer it out for the loss for the first 9 or 15%, and you get a certain amount of the upside from that. And investors historically have just had to ride along with the market. Well, they really don't have to do that anymore. You can participate over a year, over a quarter, and allow people to really participate in the upside of the market without the risk of the downside of the market. And that's what people love about these particular products.
So Katie mentioned the buffer ETFs as a bond replacement. You make the case that buffers can be better than bonds.
Yes.
Right now, bonds aren't really doing their job. You look at what's happening today, for instance, bond prices are falling, yields are rising. Make the case for why buffer ETFs can do what bonds currently can't.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, you know, bonds are down, stocks are down. I mean, aren't bonds supposed to go up when stocks go down? Well, they are supposed to. And you know what? The story we've been told for so long is that they're going to have negative correlation with one another. And you know what? Over the past, 10, 15 years, when there's a big challenge in the market or spike down the aftermarket, bonds tend to go right down with it. So people aren't buying that much anymore. That's the reason the 60-40 is struggling. The beauty of a buffer ETF is you can know your outcome. You can know I have 10% downside protection and I have this much of the upside, or I have 15% down. And so there's this guesswork, this negative correlation, these ideas that you think you need in the market that break sometimes when the market really gets broken. You don't have to worry about those. And people that are investing in the market, they would rather have the bumpers up. And also, if you're pre-retirement or in retirement, you want to have the bumpers up. Typically, you don't want to risk losing all that money.
And I have to say that buffer ETFs, they do have their detractors. Last year, actually, we spoke with AQR's Dan Villalon, who said that buffers ETFs are a failure. Let's take a quick listen.
I would say, if you kind of step back, the reason they're a failure, the reason we said that, was because we found the vast majority of investors would have been better off just having less equities in their portfolio from the start. And when I say better off, I mean both in terms of higher returns over time and mitigated drawdowns. So that's why they kind of miss on both counts.
Yeah, I see this a lot on social media. There's a big debate. AQR brought it up. There's been some other quants who are like, well, you really just should do this, even a little bit of cash and the equities long term would do the same thing with less fees. What do you say in response to these objections?
What I would say is that in that situation, cash is a total drag. You don't get any return from cash. Yes, it will reduce your risk, obviously. I mean, if you want to reduce your risk completely, go all to cash. You know, but
you can see on the screens a moment or two ago the spike in oil prices, the graph that we've been showing. Let me just tell you, the Reuters news agency is just reporting that Donald Trump has said he is going to review options to combat that spike in oil prices as soon as today. So clearly his eye on what is happening as well and the consequences. If there is detail about what he intends to do, we'll obviously return to that. But here in the UK, there's been more activity at RAF Fairford as waves of US bombers arrive after Keir Starmer granted permission for the US to use the base. For the first time during the Iran conflict, B-52s have landed in the UK. They're capable of carrying over 30,000 kilograms of weaponry. Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron has been in Cyprus today, where he warned an attack on the island is an attack on all of Europe. His visit comes as France increases its military deployments to the waters around Cyprus. The move follows that attack by a suspected Iranian drone.
We're going to go to balance of power.
Exactly is going to come next in the standoff here, the conflict between the U.S. and Iran. Dare we call it a war? I'm Joe Matthew. It's great to see you. I hope you had a good weekend. We're glad you're with us here on the Monday edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio, streaming live on YouTube right now. Search Bloomberg Business News Live, unless you've got us on Bloomberg Originals, where we always save you a seat in the studio. By far the largest oil disruption in history. How's that for a headline? And it's not coming even from a news agency. It's coming from our friend Bob McNally at Rapidan Energy. The note to clients that went out this morning is a doozy. Gulf War III, he calls it. Just seeing that in the subject line is kind of a grabber. Is that what we're calling this now, Gulf War III? I haven't heard anybody put a title on it before, Bob. Looks a lot like World War
Neil
III,
Ferguson
maybe.
did it on Goodfellas just a
Gulf
couple
War
days
III,
ago.
by far
This
the
guy doesn't
largest
follow
oil
the news.
disruption in history and has zeroed out spare capacity. The second part of that line is really important here, and I'm going to illustrate to you what we're talking about here, because we're looking at a 20% global oil supply disruption. Boats aren't going through the strait. I think maybe two went through the weekend. Imagine being on one of those, and of course, if they're backed by Iran, well, they've got the green light. President Trump on Air Force One asked about this incredible surge in oil prices by our own Josh Wingrove, who was packed in the back of the jet when the president walked back to take questions. Watch and listen.
About the Strait of Hormuz, there's no traffic really going through.
Well, that's, the ship's choices, but we have it cleaned out. We've wiped out their Navy. The Navy is now at the bottom of the sea, so that's the choice. This is an excursion. We figured oil prices would go up. We said, well, they'll also come down. They'll come down very fast, and we will have gotten rid of a major cancer on the face of the earth.
A major cancer on the face of the earth. Look no further than his post on Truth Social. If you didn't hear what he said to Josh Wingrove, short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over, he writes, is a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace. Where are we here on gasoline? Just dialing up AAA. The national average is now $3.47, and you know $4. And we talked to Tom Close about this the end of last week. $4 is likely around the corner when we've got triple-digit oil here, even if we're not looking at it at the moment. Was this just one big short squeeze? We're going to talk to Mike McGlone about that in a moment. We start our coverage here on the North Lawn of the White House, where Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall is standing by. If you're with us on YouTube, look at how beautiful it is out there. If nothing less, the news might be horrible today, but at least it's gorgeous outside here in the nation's capital. Tyler, what's going on? We're going to hear from the president later on today, I believe, at this Republican lawmakers retreat. This is the message from the White House, right? It's a small price to pay for world peace, Tyler.
Right, Joe, the White House really appears to be downplaying the oil price spike. We also heard from the Energy Secretary over the weekend saying that any disruption will not be long-term. This is not a long-term conflict. In his words, other officials have said that this is a short-term disruption in order to achieve the administration's broader goals when it comes to Iran. The thing is, we haven't really seen any indication that a diplomatic off-ramp is imminent in terms of hearing the Energy Secretary there say that it's not going to be long-term. In fact, we heard from President Trump over the weekend that the U.S. is actually eyeing widening this war, as he posted on Truth Social, saying that the U.S. is set to expand its list of targets. And Bloomberg News is now reporting that the president is weighing potentially deploying special operation forces to extract Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile. Now, what we can say is that it appears that even on Iran's side, we're not really looking at any de-escalation, as well as we also saw the country choose its new supreme leader. And Joe, Iranian state media reporting that the country is now prepared to sustain 6 months of fully high-intensity war power, and that we should expect to see them deploying more advanced and longer-range missiles in the coming days.
Wow, Tyler, thank you so much. We'll get back to Tyler Kendall a little bit later on in the broadcast. She's at the White House for us today. And of course, as I mentioned, the president's going to be speaking, and that will likely coincide with the late edition of Balance of Power around 5 p.m. Eastern. We will be deeply curious to hear what he says, with hope that the G7 might help here. And that's a big reason why we've seen prices relax from triple digits now to $96 when it comes to oil, at least in New York, is the G7 mulls a coordinated stockpile release. Imagine if, we open up the SPR. Well, this would be potentially a greater impact with multiple nations doing it. They didn't come to terms on it today, though. And we did hear from the French finance minister about this, Roland Lescure. Listen to what he said a short time ago.
We're not there yet. What we've agreed upon is to use any necessary tools, if need be, to stabilize the market, including the potential release of necessary stockpiles. The work is going to keep on being done in the next couple of days. The International Energy Agency was with us, so we're going to keep on working. I think they're having a governing board tomorrow, and we obviously will keep you posted as we keep on working.
Yeah, keep us posted, Minister, because this is the next problem here. Bob McNally, in this note I referred to, said this is not a demand shock. It is a simultaneous supply and buffer shock. Hold on, Roland. This is what we're talking about. The conflict, Bob writes, has disrupted both production flows and the spare capacity that markets rely on to offset disruptions. This is why we're calling it the biggest disruption in market history. Mike McGlone is watching it for us, and thank God he's here. Bloomberg Intelligence senior commodity strategist who was short crude, I don't mean that literally, but, well, you can tell me if you were, Mike, but was talking about crude heading down to $40 a barrel until this black swan event arrived. So, Mike, I'm curious, when we see crude at 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't sleep very well. I woke up, it's at $116 a barrel around 4 a.m. Is that just one big short squeeze, or are people going long into crude oil here?
I think you nailed it, Joe. It's impressive how our presidents are becoming very good crude oil traders. Remember, Mr. Biden released a lot of crude oil when it was $100 a barrel. He can still buy it back forward around 70. Mr. Trump points out it's temporary. I completely agree with him. Now, the key way I describe crude oil is it's a bear market, and when it gets buried, the low for the year around $55 a barrel, you don't want to sell until you get a good chance. Now, where is that? We just had the best chance in history, I think, to sell, and that's what producers are doing. So right now, you're looking at the front month. It got to $119.50 last night. It's a classic short squeeze. But if you look out to the contract that's going to be front month, when we're at the midterms, that's December contract. Right now, that's around 70. And I think by the end of the year, it's going to be down the year below 57, because what just happened is all these producers just had a chance to sell forward, bring on more supply, and accelerate the surpluses out of the Western Hemisphere. Now, China and Europe on Iran, that's a different story. That's where all that money, that's where all that crude from the Strait goes from. But the bottom line is, once the Strait gets open, this is the first closure ever. Once it gets open, crude should go back to what it was doing, but from a much higher level. You know what that means? It goes down harder.
Oh, my God. Somebody's going to make a lot of money, I guess, on the way down here, Mike. We just saw a headline from Reuters. President Trump mulling export curbs, tax waivers, and other moves to curb oil prices. You heard about the insurance idea. In our remaining 30 seconds, does any of this work?
The bottom line is opening the strait. That was the major faux pas. The bottom line also is Mr. Trump wants lower energy prices for midterms. He's the leader of the world's largest energy producer and net exporter, and he's going to get them. Pre-existing trends are heading that way.
Do we see $4 before we see $3 again?
We could, but I think average price of gasoline is going to be below $3 by the time we get to the midterm.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Mike.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. This will help to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. By taking ashwagandha root and by bringing down those cortisol levels and blood glucose levels, you're improving your cardiovascular health and your immune system. Turmeric will soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. Helps with cardiovascular health and immune system. Lignans helps with immune system and your endocrine system, soaks up free radicals, and brings down inflammation. Now you stack these together. This is a very powerful stack to improve your cardiovascular health. Your immune system will be boosted up, and you're bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals to help with your brain function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the turmeric, the ashwagandha, lignans, take them every day, improve your brain health, cardiovascular health, and boost up that immune system. All right, let's listen to CNBC.
Telling you, you probably need some more rate cuts. Yeah, I mean, rate cuts are backing out. Rate cuts are backing out. We're now down to maybe one, possibly more than that by the end of the year. First rate cut in July. And at the last meeting, they were actually talking about, some people were talking about raising rates. Now, before you get to raising rates, you have to back out the rate cuts. But this should not be off the table for anyone. And I will tell you, we got through 2000. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Joe.
Really? It's off the table for me.
So
You want to raise rates?
Hang on, guys. All three of you, just hang on. Okay, hang on.
Okay.
In 2022, you had an oil price spike. That wasn't what cratered the economy or the markets. It was the Fed raising rates. So we should be paying attention to that. We started this year talking about 2 to 3. Now we're down to maybe 1. I mean, you have to back out the rate cuts before you get to rate hikes, and they were talking about
There's no chance you call on me. Let me just respond. In 22, the Fed raises rates, and what happens? We go into an earnings recession. Do you want that again? Do you want them to raise rates?
No, that's why I say be aware of it.
Okay, look. You never say never, but so I'm using that with some poetic license. There's no chance the Fed raising rates. Not while jobs are going the other way, right? They're not going to do it. Period. End of story. They're not going to cut rates necessarily. Not only that, to them not raising rates. Okay, you can look at the tariff. We're gonna anniversary the new tariffs at 15%. So that's really a temporary thing that's out of control. Out of control of the Fed in terms of it's not going to be demand driven, right? So they're putting tariffs on it. So I'm not worried about that.
Oil moving higher has a deflationary economic effect on the consumer. Agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me be clear. This is not my base case. I'm simply saying we shouldn't dismiss it.
But Jim, in all fairness, you weren't unclear. I think we were just all shocked that you thought that we may need to raise rates.
Hey, listen, they talked about it at the last meeting. Like, that's a warning shot. I mean, just pay attention to this is all I'm saying.
Understood. I want to get on the market, Jim. While you're saying that there's potentially a need to raise rates, I want to talk about the markets in general. Note out from JP Morgan's trade desk saying that they see the potential, at least, there's risk for the S&P to pull back to a correction level about 62.70 from its all-time high. So about 10% from the all-time high, not where we're at right now, but from the all-time high. Do you see potential in that happening? And could this CPI report, if other people see it the same way you do, is potentially a report that could lead to a rate hike? Does that have the potential to lead to that correction?
Yeah, again, base case is not rate hikes. I'm just saying we've got to be aware of it. And as for a correction of 10%, that usually happens in a given year. You should expect it. I mean, we went into this year talking about midterm election years that the average drawdown is 19%. So 10% would be nothing. And by the way, when drawdowns happen, when corrections happen, there's always a reason. It doesn't just happen just because. There's a real reason, and this is a real reason. Now, I do think the economy is strong enough to get through this.
But as I've been saying, the longer it goes on, the more damage can be done. I don't know. It feels to me like we've had that correction, but it's not in the overall market itself. It's underneath the surface. It's in the financials. It's in obviously a lot of the private equity names. It's in software. It feels to me we've experienced that already. What can probably avoid us having a headline S&P 500 10% correction is the strength that's being exhibited recently in the names like Alphabet, Apple, and NVIDIA.
One thing we have to address is the pullback in the VIX, still elevated at about 27, almost 28, but off of its highs of at least the open, where it's about 32. What do you make of this pullback? Is this simply reflexive when it comes to oil prices pulling back?
I think one of the reasons, Steve doesn't want me to use the word resiliency, but one of the reasons why when the market looks its worst, we recover is because there is a perceived edge against the volatility, and that's the price of crude oil, and we're seeing far more activity there on the part of speculators, whether it's retail, I don't know that it is, I think it's more institutional, but you have that hedge against the volatility, and it's the spot price of oil.
Yeah, Wax, I want to get your take on it. By the way, Wolf out with a note saying they see a notable spike in volatility ahead. They believe it's going to break through 30. Obviously, it already did, but they believe there's more upside when it comes to volatility.
There's more volatility is what they're saying.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But again, volatility goes both ways. People tend to think of it. There's only downside volatility.
That's why I came to you. So if the volatility goes up, where do you put the money?
Look, as I said, we see the president come out and declare victory, and I think that would be accurate to a certain extent. Any moment. It depends how much pain he's willing to tolerate in the polls, which would be painful going into Iran, and how much pressure he's getting from the party in advance of midterm elections and rising oil prices. In that case, I think you'd see a really big uptick in the market, a nice bounce. I don't know how long-lived that would be, but it would definitely bring back, the VIX. So I don't really focus on the VIX. I focus on companies. I don't focus on the technicals. I do look at them, but I take a look at where the corrections really hit the market. Take a look at a Goldman. I mean, Goldman, that's come down. That was on its way to breaking 1,000, and now we're down, and flirting with 800 on the downside. Anything changed for them? Not really. Okay. So that's where I am.
You got the NASDAQ higher. You was looking at the NASDAQ right here, just fractionally higher right now. Poking its head into green territory right now. By the way, Emily Wilkins down in Florida right now with GOP leaders in a retreat. So Wax, anything comes out of that, to your point, Weiss and Joe, also about the president maybe changing his mind, maybe getting a push from his own party with the midterms coming up. All right, coming up next on Halftime, our top call today. One firm saying for the first time in 5 years, this beaten down sector, it's a buy. We're going to see if the desk agrees. More Halftime coming up in 2 minutes.
Let's listen into Bloomberg.
Still 48 states and the District of Columbia stole an hour from us yesterday. That, of course, is not the least of it, as we witness the beginnings of Gulf War III, in the words of Bob McNally, and try to track exactly where we're going here. With the president saying on Truth Social that, yeah, it's a small price to pay. This is, God, imagine if George W. Bush or Dick Cheney said this at the outset of the Iraq War. It's a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace. And he went on in a whole different post. Short-term oil prices, he writes, this is yesterday, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over. Again, a very small price to pay. He goes on to say, holy fools, this is all caps, would think differently, exclamation point. And he did write it, it's signed, President DJT. Ashley Davis is just imagining what all these look like on bumper stickers. The Republican strategist and partner at S3 Group is with us right now on Bloomberg. It's great to see you, Ashley. You remember, obviously, the messaging that came around the Exxons and Halliburtons when we went into Iraq. Now I guess we're just saying it out loud here. The fact of the matter is, if we get to $4 a gallon gas and it remains stubborn, these words could haunt the president, no?
Absolutely, but let's remember the president's not running for re-election again, and he always has a surprise tweet or Truth Social. So Listen, I hope that the markets and the oil prices will shake out. I mean, obviously, it's better right now than it was last night. And there's some things that are being put in place from what I understand. And actually, your guest just beforehand was talking about some of them and also the pipelines in Saudi Arabia and UAE. But listen, I'm probably a little more conservative on this issue. Especially with my Bush days and knowing Iran, Iraq, just that part of the world a little bit, that I think that the president, the last thing he's worrying about right now, or when he attacked Iran, was the fact that what the midterms were going to be about. I think this is a once in a generational opportunity to take out these leaders. They're horrific leaders, and they understood, we understood, our allies understood what would happen with the oil prices. So hopefully, it's only day, what is it now, 8 or 9? I think we're starting 9 actually. Yep. So hopefully this will be, we will have things in place that will help the oil prices, but also make sure the Iranian people are safe and have a democracy that they can live.
But I was wondering yesterday if it was the clock change, because everyone was calling it day 9 yesterday. It was a week on Saturday, right? I'm confused, actually. I'm following your count right now. I'm going to call it 9 today.
I guess it was. 9, 10.
This will come home at this retreat. It doesn't matter, of course. But the president's talking to the rank and file, the House Republican Conference at retreat down in Miami, and I think they're at Doral, right? He's going to talk around 5 o'clock. What will he tell members who are acutely aware of everything you just said? Donald Trump's not on the ballot, but I am. And these are the prices that my constituents are paying. How do we message this so everyone understands what Ashley is talking about?
First of all, I think this is a really hard message for Republicans because, and I've said this many times, I mean, most people, especially on the Republican side, do not want us to be at war anywhere. There's very few people that do, especially in the MAGA world. I mean, you see that the splintering of that a little bit. I always also say that unless you have the intelligence that a president of the United States has or some of his team to understand how truly bad these people are, your ignorance is bliss for most of America, right? But I think he's going to say probably nice, hopefully a little better than what he did on True Social, was to tell that, hopefully this is a short time pain to have something that is better for the United States in the long run. Again, that's going to have to be something that the rank and file Republicans are going to have to believe and trust him on, especially the ones that lived through the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. But there's not that many of them anymore. Maybe in the Senate, not the House. There's so much turnover. But I think that he's going to give the same message. And then listen, we're still far out. I'm always a big believer that we have until maybe July.
Okay, oil just broke 95 barrier. So it's now trading at 94.95. It just went to 95 now. So it's hovering at that 95, trying to break it. Now it's at 94.80. So this is going to continue to go down. Now the question is, will it start to go back up? Who knows? Who knows? I mean, today is a wild day in oil. It went over $100 a barrel overnight and then came back down and then started trading at 104 and then came back down. So anything can happen on day 10 of the Iranian war. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. Myotrol will help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. This is really important if you're 40 years of age or older. You need to do resistance training more regularly and take Myotrol to help with the gene expression, to build muscle and to maintain muscle, to prevent atrophy. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. Now, if you're an athlete, taking Myotrol, even if you're young or older as an athlete, taking Myotrol will help you with your sport. Gladiator barley. Take it every day. This is going to also help build muscle. Make sure you do resistance training, but it will also bring down inflammation so you recover quicker. soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. This is very powerful. Do some resistance training, and this will also help with your cardiovascular health, help with your immune system and your brain function. Because you bring down inflammation and you detoxify, you're helping other organ systems. So please go to my store and get the Gladiator Barley. It's going to help, again, to build muscle, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. You can take it separately, or you can stack it with the Myotrol to get the added benefits that you need to build muscle. This is something you should be taking every day, no matter what your age. Why? Because this is going to help to slow down the aging process. Now, if you're an athlete, you will benefit in your sport if you take this combo, no matter what your age is. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off anywhere.
I don't know if you're keeping count on that one, but we're weeks into a partial government shutdown, and there's no one's going to break, I guess, on either side of this. There was a thought last week when Kristi Noem was reassigned, if I can use that word, that might be enough, that new leadership might be enough, that a Mark Wayne Mullen confirmation process might bring enough conversation around that people would vote to, or Democrats would vote to refund the agency. I've got a minute left. How are you looking at this? And to the extent that you know Mark Wayne Mullen, will he bring any change to this agency?
I think, yes, no, and I know Mark Wayne from the House days as well. I mean, he, before he ran for Senate, but listen, I think he's going to have probably more confidence than Kristi Noem had, especially at the end, and especially after some of the ICE issues. He's respected in the Senate. You already have at least Senator Fetterman saying he's going to vote for him. I actually think the tipping point maybe on some of this DHS funding shutdown is maybe the long lines at the airports yesterday or this weekend that are finally starting to happen. And then I think this Friday, the first time TSA will miss a paycheck. So the Senate, some senators would really like Senator Mullen to be confirmed in the next 3 weeks that the Senate's in before they go out for Easter break. So it will be interesting to see if there's some sort of deal negotiated during that time. I'm not ready to give that up.
We're going to be watching. Okay, we're not either. We'll stay with you on this. Ashley Davis, S3 Group. Thank you, Ashley, our Republican strategist who is at the...
We're going to go to BBC News. But before we do, please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex. This helps to reduce the load on your pancreas when you're digesting your food. This will break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Really important, and they'll allow you to absorb your nutrients and keep your pancreas healthy. Super important. And digestive enzyme complex has bromelain. It's an enzyme that is fibrinolytic, so it can break up clots. And digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. Super important, especially during the cold season. Now, I have a new product called Collagen, and Collagen will help to remodel and repair joints, either due to arthritis or some sort of sports injury. But collagen, really important. Really important to take, but you can also take it with collagen as a stack. Now, collagen works by being able to recruit and use type 2 collagen to remodel your cartilage, and ACAN to remodel and improve the cushioning of the joint. Also, collagen will block certain enzymes that cause the inflammation and the pain in your joint. It blocks MMP3 and MMP13, also EP4. By doing that, you're reducing inflammation, reducing additional erosion, and blocking some of the pain that you may have. And collagen also helps to recruit the glucosamine to remodel the cartilage and chondroitin that helps with the cushioning of the joint. So this is pretty powerful stuff. Please go to my store and get the collagen. Stack it with the collagen to get additional benefits.
As I have demonstrated time and time again, I will take the necessary decisions to help families with the cost of living and protect the public finances. I'm clear-eyed about my response to the current situation. My economic approach will both be responsive to a changing world and responsible in the national interest. The economic impact of the situation in the Middle East will depend, of course, on its severity and its duration. The movements that we have already seen are likely to put upward pressure on inflation in the coming months. But I also want to confirm to the House that our financial markets are functioning, and I'm in regular touch with the Governor of the Bank of England. This afternoon, I spoke with G7 finance ministers, setting out my priorities for the international cooperation needed. First, calling for immediate de-escalation and a return to the diplomatic process. Second, we must guarantee the security of vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Third, I stand ready to support a coordinated release of collective International Energy Agency oil reserves. And fourth, the UK will play its part as the global hub of maritime insurance. And I am meeting with the chair of Lloyd's of London later today, where we will discuss how best to support the continued passage of maritime trade. I want to ensure the country that the fundamentals of Britain's economy are strong. Every step that I have taken since the election has built our national resilience, stability in the public finances, investment in infrastructure, in both defence and energy security, and reform to our economy. Last week, I updated the House about our progress in delivering that plan. We have cut inflation, so that it is now at 3%.
I'm going to go to Al Jazeera to see what they have to say.
When you walk into a Burlington, you'll be amazed at how much we've changed. Brands.
We share a 534 kilometers border with 3 crossings, a very strong cultural, economic, energy, and social ties between the two. However, we have 2 incidents in a row within less than a week. 2 missiles launched from Iran and intercepted by the NATO air defense missile systems before they reached the Turkish soil. Turkey has been sending warnings to the Iranian authorities. Turkish Foreign Ministry, Defense Ministry are making the necessary contacts with their counterparts in Tehran. Also, we heard Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan just less than an hour ago speaking after the cabinet meeting. He said that the necessary warnings have been made to the Iranian side. Turkey has been warning Iran, trying to keep this tension at a low pace because Turkey doesn't want a regional tension. Turkey doesn't want any more destabilization in the region. Turkey doesn't want destabilization of Iran either, as there are so many Turks, millions of Turks, Azeri Turks in Iran. Also, there are there's a Kurdish population in Iran, which can be linked to the Outlaw Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, terrorism issues that are directly linked with Turkey. So while Turkey is a NATO member and any attack against Turkey would be considered an attack to the NATO, and Turkish soil is considered as a NATO territory, on the other hand, Turkey has to keep a balanced relation with Iran. So far, they have been sending warnings, but if Iran continues to say these missiles accidentally hit the Turkish soil, if it goes further, no one has any idea about how far these warnings are going to go. Back to you, Sami.
And Sinem, we've heard NATO saying it will stand firm. What does standing firm actually mean in terms of policy?
Well, Sami, as I said, Turkey is the second largest military, the army within the NATO. And when NATO was established, the pact says that if any country within the NATO is attacked by another party, then it is considered as an act of war that targets all other NATO countries. That's why any attack in Turkey, especially aiming at the NATO bases or the US bases in Turkey, can be a reason where the Western countries, NATO ally countries, will be involved in the war as well. But probably neither the West nor Iran nor Turkey or others want this war go that further. But this is a strong message that
I'm going to go back to Bloomberg here.
The time we get into our second hour, we'll have some more news on that. So many people, when they get into the Oval Office, whether it's a reporter, a photographer, maybe an onlooker, everyone, as you see, has been zeroing in on the president's ankles and his hands. See if the bruises are on the hands, the swollen ankles. You've been party to this conversation. When you watch the pool shot, they call it the pool. This is the individual. Each day it's a rotation. There's got a couple of cameras in there that feed the pool, and it's their responsibility to transmit all these images back for those who cannot actually be in the room. And they zoom in while the president's talking on these body parts to try to gauge his health, right? Some of the issues that he's been facing. The president, looking back in the other direction, is looking at your shoes. This is a fascinating story in the Wall Street Journal. It's the hottest and most exclusive MAGA status symbol, according to the paper. A pair of floor-shine shoes. If you're with us on YouTube, look, they're all wearing the same ones. Not just Donald Trump, but Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, they've got them. Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary Pete Hegseth, Howard Lutnick, Comms Director Stephen Chung, even the Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair, the speechwriter Ross Worthington, even Sean Hannity has a $145 pair of black floor-shine shoes. The president likes the way they feel at the end of a long day. And it's funny now, he's looking at people and he sizes you up. He takes a guess at what your shoe size is and then has the box of shoes he has today to put it in an order. A week later, the brown floor shine box with your name on it arrives. I think this is remarkable. So much for the Louis Vuittons. It's floor shine at $145. Producer James didn't realize till right now that he was so in style. I wonder how many members of the House will be wearing them today. Lindsey Graham has a pair as well. Maybe the president will be sizing up the Republican conference when he gets to the big GOP retreat, because it is happening now. Oh, look at this too. Not just the GOP retreat where the president was going to speak, but James Mahoney just let me know that I'm going to be working late this evening. Donald Trump to hold a news conference at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, right smack dab in the middle of the late edition of Balance of Power. I'm sorry, Kaylee, I'll stay late. You don't have to be here for the whole thing. We need to get to our panel because part of the government's still closed. We talked about this for a couple of minutes with Ashley Davis. Doesn't matter what shoes you're wearing. The Department of Homeland Security is shut down, knowing that ICE still has the money and the TSA does not. Did you get stuck in New Orleans or Houston last weekend? They're telling people to show up 4 or 5 hours early for a flight. The pictures are horrifying. And everybody saw this coming. We went through this during the longest government shutdown in history, right? Pretty soon you'll be hearing about flights being impacted as well when TSA agents have to go drive for Uber or whatever it is they do to make money in times like this. It's a pretty desperate state of affairs when you're working a pretty tough job already. And this is where we start with our political panel, with the GOP retreat in the background and a DHS that's closed in the foreground. Bloomberg Politics contributor Jeannie Shanzano is with us. Democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, joined today with us at the table by Republican strategist Maura Gillespie, Blue Stack Strategies founder and veteran, of course, of Speaker John Boehner's office many years ago in a very different political environment. Ladies, it's great to see you both. Welcome. Maura, I'll start with you. Did you train or plane into D.C.?
I drove, and I'm now worried about getting back given the gas prices.
But, oh, all right. So there's a whole other problem. It doesn't matter what mode you pick, apparently. And by the way, if you want to take the train, you'll be surrounded by people who just jumped off their flight so they could try to get to New York. Mm-hmm. Is this what breaks the back again, like it did in the last shutdown?
Well, it's springtime's coming, so people are going on spring break trips.
Right.
They've got travel. You've got summer coming up just around the corner. And I think when you look at not only gas prices for driving your car, but also for flights, couple that with the TSA issues, flights are also going up. And there have been a couple airline CEOs that said they're going to have to raise prices pretty drastically given the war in Iran. And so I think that you're going to hear from more and more people who are very frustrated, given the fact that this war was not favorable to begin with. They're going to be more and more frustrated by this lack of focus on things that are actually impacting the American people. Trump's not worried about filling up his gas tank. He's not worried about what it costs to fly. Yeah. But that's a concern that American people are feeling right now, and they're going to be feeling it as we get close to the summer.
Well, small price to pay were the words that he used. Jeannie, maybe you've already made the T-shirt. I can only imagine what Democrats are going to do with the rhetoric here of just this past weekend. Small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace. Only fools would think differently, Jeannie. How foolish do you feel today?
Well, I feel foolish that I don't have floor-shine shoes, but do they make them for women, Joe? I have no idea.
That's a great question. I only see dudes wearing these.
I know, and Maura and I may be out as we stand in long lines, or we can't drive, so we have to walk. Potentially, the president sends women some shoes like this. I don't know. Yeah, that was quite a statement the president made over the weekend about only fools. The reality is that for so many people, they don't have the luxury that the president has of having Air Force One, of having drivers, or so many of the people surrounding him. We have to be concerned about the price of oil, the price of gas, the price of flights, the time we have to wait in those lines. So all of this concerning, and it seems to me that President Trump took a lesson from Joe Biden. He criticized him on the campaign trail, but he seems to try to be following the Biden playbook of this isn't quite as bad as you're making it out. This is worth it. And of course, we know you can't talk people into feeling something they don't feel. And oh, by the way, if it's so worth it, then to explain why.
Well, even if the House passed a funding bill for DHS, Maura, it apparently wouldn't be signed by the president. He's got other ideas here. Again, on Truth Social, the Save America Act is what he wants to sign first, saying the measure must go to the front of the line and not the watered-down version. He says he will not sign other bills until this is passed. Now, you worked for a former Speaker of the House. What in the world does Mike Johnson do with this, knowing that he's got a funding bill to clear?
Well, not only that, but the bill that the Senate now has, that with the additions the president wants, that's not what was passed by the House.
That's true.
So it goes back because it has to get reconciled. So there becomes another hurdle there just to get that passed.
So is the House just closed to that?
They're currently closed right now.
Yeah.
So they're not in this week. The Senate is. The Senate was supposed to vote today. I believe it's at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And they're going to take up the DHS funding and presumably the SAFE Act. But how do they get there when Thune has already expressed hardships in getting to that threshold of 60? And so if the president's refusing to sign anything until the SAFE Act goes through with all these additions that have been brought onto it, it does create more of a problem for not only Thune, but also Johnson.
So how tough is the conversation at this retreat? I mean, we're all down in Miami feeling good about things. The president's coming over, but we don't agree on anything.
Well, the problem is, too, is that the messaging at large sounds fine, right? Because I think a majority of the American people are in agreement that you should show an ID when you vote. That doesn't seem to be super controversial. It is the add-ons and the overly aggressive, I will say, tactics that are attached to it that's not being messaged, and that does create more confusion. There are some issues. There's exceptions for sickness, for travel, for military, but if they have to still go in person to prove their identification, it kind of negates the mail-in voting thing. So there are questions that are not being fleshed out or being messaged. So I don't know how the conference is going. I have a kind of guess about how the conference is going in Florida. It's probably just you're doing so great, President Trump. Congratulations, well done. But the reality back here in D.C. is very different.
Jeannie, what does it tell you when the president needs to pull the trigger on a 5:30 p.m. news conference same day? I mean, this could have been scheduled last week, obviously, and maybe they had it in mind. But this does seem like an administration that thinks the president needs to be in front of the people.
Absolutely. The president responds to a couple things, and one of the main ones are the markets. And as you see oil rise to over $100 a barrel and slip and slide around there, people paying across 50% more. We're looking at some of these states where there's an election in November where it's going to be really tough for the GOP. His party, he himself, they are at risk here. And Just a few days ago, the State of the Union, he was trumpeting how he has successfully addressed the cost of energy and oil that Joe Biden, he claimed, had caused to raise. And now look where we are. So Susie Wiles last week mentioned this as a big concern. We know it's a big concern. So the president is going to have to address that. And he's going to have to say more than just, you're a fool if you don't know that this is important and you should suck it up. It sounds a bit like, you don't need more than $1 and you don't need more than a couple pencils. It's not good messaging.
I've stopped using pencils altogether to not be part of the problem. So how do you transmit that? And I don't think you have all the answers here, Maura, but I mean, I saw a couple of members doing TV this morning, and they were very busy trying to make the case for this military action, that this is something that's a generational opportunity, first time in 47 years. Now that's going to cloud the affordability message, right? Because that's the story that lawmakers are going to have to tell as long as this is hot.
I think one of the problems too is that's one piece of the explanation we're getting. The other piece is that it's humanitarian, it's for safety and security. They were going to attack us. This is about making sure that we stop the Ayatollah. I mean, there is a lack of consistent messaging that's going on. And I understand that there are members who do believe, obviously, that there's no sympathy or love lost for the Iranian regime. But the messaging back home and to their constituents as to why they are supportive or they should be patient and watch this play out has been unclear. And I think that leads to more frustrations when you couple that with the affordability concerns. And again, this disconnect between what's going on at home in reality versus what the president sees as his doing a great job.
Yeah, right. It's pretty hard to argue this stuff when you consider everything that we just mentioned. People waiting in lines for hours at the airports. They're watching jet fuel, and therefore the cost of flights increase. But transportation on any level, if you have $3.5, $4 a gallon gas in your car, that's all part of the same story. When lawmakers are trying to explain the justification for a war, it's all stemming from the same cause.
And then you're also seeing this call by the Iranian regime, whatever's left of them, saying that to all their sleeper cells here in the United States and to around the world to go ahead and unleash and go ahead and attack. And so then people are reading that, they feel as though that now their safety here at home is also threatened, not only their livelihoods in terms of gas prices, but also their safety and security here. So if it was to stop us from being attacked, what did this do?
Yeah, wow, there's a lot there. And I sure hope that's not something that we're going to be reporting on anytime soon. We'll have Country Joe McDonald to sing about it anymore. Did you hear? This is for the old people. Country Joe has died. Yeah. You're going to go home and watch Woodstock later and turn it up. And boy, don't offend the neighbors. Make sure the kids are out of the room. Remember the I feel like I'm fixing to die rag? There he is. 84 years old, Parkinson's disease. Don't give me an F. Come back for the second hour. Balance of Power only on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The next stop is Vietnam, and it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, I ain't no time to wonder why. We all know that.
Let's listen to Fox News. Hezbollah targets Israel with new missile barrage.
Power and experience on full display in the Middle East. The U.S. military's Operation Epic Fury pushing forward in Iran. Central Command announcing U.S. forces hit more than 3,000 targets in the first full week. Israel is now unleashing a new round of attacks on targets inside Iran and Lebanon. The Israeli Defense Force focusing on the infrastructure of the Iranian terror regime. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. CENTCOM posted this video of the U.S. Air Force at work. The caption, the sound of American warfighting dominance. New satellite images from Iran showing heavy damage from U.S. and Israeli aerial attacks. And Iran's fighting capabilities under heavy fire now. Black smoke rising from burning ships and damaged facilities at a naval base in the southern part of the country. And the U.S. and Israel also taking out Iranian warplanes at an air base in that same area. Look at what's left, scorched earth and debris. All that's left of the bombed aircraft. General Jack Keane.
It's quite remarkable how close to the plan that we are executing, with stunning results, to be quite frank about it. The Israelis are hitting all those other targets I mentioned with the U.S. But what the Israelis are doing exclusively is attacking the organization. All the organizations that sustain this regime, Mark, they are systematically and deliberately taken down here.
An entire street erupted as buildings in the capital city of Tehran were attacked by Israel. The IDF going after several oil depots over the weekend. Meanwhile, Iranian leaders have named Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Iran's late supreme leader, as the successor. And you see the younger Khamenei is even more of a hardliner than his brutal father. Fox News correspondents are covering the story from every angle, multiple locations: London, Istanbul, Turkey, Israel, Armenia, and Dubai. We are bringing you the very latest developments as this conflict unfolds minute by minute. Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb will come up with me in focus in just a bit. Chief National Correspondent Jennifer Griffin with new information out of CENTCOM right now. But first, let's go to Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yates. Okay, he's inside a safety area. We'll talk with you for just a bit, as long as you can.
Harris, I've got you. Yeah, Harris, I've got you. We had a report prepared for you on Iran's new supreme leader. Suddenly, sirens just sounded across Israel's second largest city of Tel Aviv. This was some of the heaviest incoming fire that we have seen in recent days. And just given the fact that there was no early alert is an indication that this fire, and my producer just now is telling me, came from Lebanon. So Hezbollah launching at least one missile at Tel Aviv. And again, they still have these long-range capabilities. We're going to get you this video we were rolling as this attack was taking place. And we could just see about 5 or 6 different interceptor rounds, Harris, soar through the air to try to take down this incoming fire that was coming directly from southern Lebanon. Again, just an indication of the threats that this country faces, and as they are looking to see what comes next on the ground in Iran, following the news overnight that a new supreme leader was chosen, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of Iran's former supreme leader who was killed in the opening strikes of Operation Epic Fury. Harris?
Yeah, you know what? I've been reading about him, and I know that this is an odd detail, but someone alerted me to the fact that it was so entrenched that he's the new leader that Wikipedia updated their page. And when I went there, I realized there was this warning, well, more like an informational graph, saying that this could change due to an event. I would assume that's the war on Iran right now. But what do we know about this younger son? And I know his family was hit in some of the strikes that we put on their military leaders, us and Israel.
Yeah, Harris, absolutely. Reports indicate that his wife and his mother and one son were killed, in addition to his father, in the U.S. and Israeli strikes that targeted the capital of Tehran. Mojtaba Khamenei is considered a hardliner. He was largely seen as the shadow prince of Iran. He was the gatekeeper for his father. He studied at Qom Seminary just south of Tehran, where many of the Shia clerics are studying in order to become leaders inside of Iran. And given the fact that he was closely following in the footsteps of his father, he was actually one of the leading forces behind the scenes, according to reports that led the crackdown on protesters inside of Iran, not just earlier this year, but also during the Green Movement protests in 2009. And so that is part of the reason that President Trump said he would not be happy if he's chosen as the next supreme leader. And again, he is considered just the next step in succession to his father, who obviously for the past several decades has been building up a regime that has threatened U.S. forces and allies across the region.
What do we know, and I know you gave us a little bit there, so the IRGC and part of the military and all of that, but what do we know about his acumen in that area? I mean, is that why we're seeing a ramp up yet, almost like a second try at all this, even though we've killed their Navy capacity, so they don't have that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the American and Israeli strikes against the Iranian regime have decimated the military structure of this country so far. They've systematically taken out their communication and command systems that allow officials in Tehran to communicate with their military in the field. And so they built their military around this, planning for this mosaic defense. But the reality is, as these strikes continue, we can expect more of Iran's leadership to be taken out. And it makes it very challenging for Iran to fight for long periods of time. They say that they are prepared for a months-long war. The reality will be quite different, despite the fact that there is still incoming fire from Iran itself, the ballistic missiles that soar through the skies of this country. Earlier today, one person was killed in central Israel, and the fire that we just saw now from Hezbollah. It is a military that will continue to be depleted in the days ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the son. I mean, is he in command and control of this right now? Does he even have that kind of experience? Because what you're saying is that they continue to take out particularly military leadership, who will be left to make these decisions and use all that warfare. Any quick thought on that?
My quick thought is we don't know. We have very limited information out of Iran, and as it relates to the new supreme leader, all of this information is coming from state media. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian just put out a statement about an hour ago confirming this vote, but it is challenging to get confirmed information on what this leadership structure looks like as these American and Israeli strikes continue.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to be moving so quickly now with U.S. and Israeli forces just in so much power at this point, as Iran still tries to, I don't know if it's fakery, I don't know what it is that they're trying to show, but they're not winning. Trey, I know you're in a bunker right now. Stay safe. Thank you for the great report as always.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. This has 68 nutrients, is a very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen here. This will help to slow down the aging process and focus on many different systems: brain function, cardiovascular, musculature, energy levels, and metabolism. You will feel the effects of this within 72 hours. You'll have a steady burn of energy throughout the whole day, and you will be more active. And by taking this regularly for a year, you're going to notice that you are slowing down the aging process and getting healthier. Your brain function will improve. You will have better memory. You will have the ability to concentrate. You're going to get rid of that brain fog. You're going to sleep better. You're bringing down inflammation. You're helping with your cardiovascular health. And by bringing down inflammation, you're also helping your immune system. So please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost. It stacks really well with C60. And C60 is a very potent antioxidant. It's a carbon molecule, 60 carbons in the molecule, and it has to be suspended in an oil. You can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, or MCT coconut oil. It needs to be in an oil for proper absorption. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach. Take it every day. It's going to soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. And by taking this every day, your energy levels will improve. You're going to have more ATP. Your endocrine system and your immune system will improve. Your brain function will improve. cardiovascular system will improve. Why? By soaking up free radicals and bringing down inflammation, you're reducing stress in tissues. And by doing that, the tissues will perform better. At the vascular level, by soaking up free radicals, you're reducing plaque formation. At the brain level, by soaking up free radicals and improving the mitochondria, you're having more ATP to produce the neurotransmitters. By bringing down inflammation at the neuron level, you are maintaining the myelin sheath around your neuron. So you get a lot of benefits from taking C60 every day, a teaspoon a day, every day. I've been doing this since 2016. In addition, this will also help with your skin. At the basal layer, where you're producing new skin cells, you're improving that basal layer by taking C60. It stacks really well with the Boomer Boost, and it also stacks very well with resveratrol. So please go to my store and get the C60, the Boomer Boost. Make sure you use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. This is a great way to slow down the aging process and to get healthy. These are supplements that I've been taking for a very long time. So please take my advice, slow down the aging process. Well, that is the broadcast for today. The main takeaway, oil is volatile. It can go up really quick and it can go down really quick. It went up as much as over $115 a barrel last night, and now it's trading at $94.51. But if the Strait of Hormuz doesn't start to flow oil tankers and LNG tankers, then there is a high probability of further increase in oil and natural gas. But it's volatile. Price movements can move up and down quickly. So pay attention. You have to, you have to realize that any So energy could continue to go up. Many people think it's going to go to 120, 130, maybe even 150. Some people last night said 200. But once the strait starts to open up, then I think that prices are going to precipitously drop pretty quickly. Thank you for listening. Please make sure you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great supplements that I offer. And have a nice day.